Through the course of Tuesday evening, all spinning around a big area of low pressure up to the northwest. Wednesday will again bring plenty of showers and again some pretty heavy ones, mostly across parts of the south and the west. Looking a little drier on Wednesday, perhaps across parts of southern Scotland, and eastern England may not see too many showers by Wednesday afternoon. And again, there will be some sunshine around between the showers. And again, it will at times be fairly breezy, but it will still be mild with temperatures, again, mostly a few degrees above average, 11 to 15, getting even warmer come the end of this week. Bye for now.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank and, of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Yes, hello everybody, I'm Patrick Christys. I hope you got some rest over the weekend because we've got a bumper news day today. Controversy over COP, nurses set to strike, Sunak meets Macron on Channel Migrant crisis, Braverman is live in the House of Commons about migrant detention centres, and it's official, lockdown damaged kids. Coming up, I've got a niggling feeling that Rishi Sunak is going to sell us out at COP27. We'll be hearing from our Prime Minister live at 4 p.m. on this very show. Do you want to pay compensation to smaller countries for environmental damage? I certainly don't. We've got tax hikes, energy costs, cuts to public services. Oh, but we can lob a load of money to the Marshall Islands to say, sorry, you're underwater now. No, not a priority. We give away billions in foreign aid, and that's that as far as I'm concerned. The Channel Migrant crisis. We've given the French around 100 million big ones to stop small boats. They're taking our money, laughing at us and not doing their job. Sunak meets Macron today to try to thrash out a deal with the French leader. That will be like playing chess with a pigeon. No matter what move you make, it'll just walk across the board, defecate on it and knock all the pieces over. No more money to the French is what I'm saying. And this is big, people, because in just 20 minutes' time, we'll be live in the House of Commons where Suella Braverman will be grilled by MPs over the ongoing issue of overcrowding at the Manston Immigration Centre in Kent. We'll bring you that questioning right here very, very shortly, so don't you dare move. And big one again, as nurses across the UK are set to strike in the first ever national action over a pay dispute, I'll ask, is it selfish putting their pay demands ahead of patients? People will die, in my book, and that's not on. Let me know what you think. I'm asking GBViews at gbnews.uk on all of the above. But one of the big ones, should it be illegal for nurses to strike? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Now, though, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The COP27 climate summit has been told the world's action on climate change is either collective solidarity or a collective suicide pact. The UN Secretary-General says countries need a clear finance roadmap to prevent irreversible climate chaos. Antonio Guterres is calling for a universal early warning system within the next 5 years and for all governments to impose a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies. He says, we're in the fight of our lives and we're losing.
The two largest economies, the United States and China, have a particular responsibility to join efforts to make this pact a reality. And this is our only hope of meeting our climate goals. Humanity has a choice, cooperate or perish. It is either a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact.
The Prime Minister is due to address the conference this afternoon and will tell world leaders at the gathering that the UK will become a clean energy superpower. The Prime Minister is expected to raise the migrant crisis with his French counterparts. Rishi Sunak and Emmanuel Macron are holding bilateral talks at the summit. It says controversy continues around the Manston Processing Centre in Kent, where protesters have been demanding the facility's closure. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says they need to discuss new tactics to deal with people smugglers.
The focus for my discussion would be on how we work upstream to stop the people smugglers. Before, as a politician, I was the Director of Public Prosecutions. I know how these cross-border operations work. We would work with France upstream to stop the smugglers in the first place. That's the discussion I would have. I hope it's the discussion that our Prime Minister will have.
Well, as the climate conference gets underway, environmental protesters have been disrupting traffic on England's busiest motorway. 23 people have now been arrested after police were forced to shut sections of the M25 this morning. The motorway is now said to be clear of protesters and motorists are again moving.
Hello, my name is Louise. I'm 24 years old and I'm here. I'm here because I don't have a future. And you might hate me for doing this, and you're entitled to hate me. But I wish you would direct all that anger and hatred at our government. They are betraying young people like me.
Downing Street says the Prime Minister has a zero-tolerance approach to bullying. Well, it's after it emerged that Sir Gavin Williamson sent threatening text messages to the former Chief Whip, Wendy Morton. Number 10 says Rishi Sunak retains full confidence in the Cabinet Office Minister and welcomes that Sir Gavin expressed regret over the messages. Measures to prevent the spread of bird flu have come into force across England. All poultry and captive birds must now be kept indoors as the UK faces its largest outbreak of avian flu. It's been discovered at over 90 properties and found in more than 200 dead wild birds since the start of October. Tom Koppas, who's the manager at Koppas Turkey, says there's no risk to human health.
It's not a risk of human health, no. There is no, I've been had that and good assurance as well, even if it was an infected bird, it's completely safe for a human to eat. It's more about trying to stop the spread of this disease and the spread of the disease through wild birds because of the huge effects it has. And obviously, it's currently in poultry. We don't want to see it jump to other breeds, whether it jumps to pigs or something like that. We want to obviously contain it to poultry.
There's ongoing disruption to rail services today, despite the train strikes being called off. RMT cancelled the action after securing the promise of a pay offer from the train companies. The late suspension of the walkout means, though, many operators are still running a reduced timetable. Network Rail says there's quite a mixed picture of delays and cancellations depending on the operator. A service has been held to mark the opening of the Royal British Legion's Field of Remembrance. The field at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire pays tribute to those who've lost their lives in conflict from World War I to the present day. It will be open to the public to pay their respects until the end of the month. You're up to date on GB News and I'll bring you more as it develops. Now back to Patrick.
Happy Monday. We've got the absolute lot of it today, people. In just a few moments' time, we'll be live in the House of Commons watching homosexuella being grilled by MPs about conditions at a migrant detention centre. We'll be live at 4 p.m. finding out whether or not Rishi Sunak is going to sell us all out and make us pay reparations to smaller countries. They can swivel, as far as I'm concerned. But here's an issue I want to get in touch with you straight off the bat. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Nurses, they save lives, they do important work, but I think if they strike, they will have blood on their hands. They want a 15% pay rise, otherwise they will strike, and people won't get things like chemotherapy. That's the long and the short of it. If they strike, some people won't get chemo. Do you support a nurses' strike? Big question is here, is a 15% pay rise too much? Should it be illegal for them to strike? How would you feel if your health suffers as a result of this strike? I went to an A&E department earlier, actually, to ask nurses and patients what they thought about this potential strike.
Something has to be done.
You would die for a nurses' strike?
I would absolutely do anything that I possibly can. Die not because they will find someone. They won't let anybody die. They will delay services.
That could lead to death, though, couldn't it?
I'm severely ill. I've had 24 operations on the...
Gosh, sorry about that.
Thank you. And I can tell you 100% that these people won't let anybody die.
15%, that's a lot. 8%, yeah. But 15% it's a lot.
We're really short of staff. We're not really paid well. There's really a shortness of resources as well. Everyone sees their little circle and their life. So obviously from what we do, we care for people. I care for patients in intensive care. Without us, what are they going to do? So obviously for us, what we're paid is not worth what we're doing.
Considering the hours that they put in and the lives that they save and the hard work...
15%.
15%, it sounds fair to me.
Your views then, ladies and gentlemen, GBviews at gbnews.uk. I am of the view that if they strike, then people will die. If I went on strike, no one would notice. In fact, there's every chance that ratings might go up. However, if I was to strike and people would die, that would keep me in work, wouldn't it? They say that urgent care won't be affected, but I don't see how that can be the case. Is 15% too much of a pay rise? They already got a dollop of cash this year, by the way, they don't tell you about that, and a dollop of cash the year before. They might say that wasn't enough. Isn't that down to their union to have negotiated better? GBviews at gbnews.uk. I know how I would feel if a relative of mine was undergoing chemotherapy and that chemo didn't happen because nurses were striking over a 15% pay rise. They do important work, but I'm sorry, I'm just not on board with it. Should it be illegal for nurses to strike? GBviews at gbnews.uk. But it's an action-packed show today, ladies and gentlemen. We're returning to the nurses' stuff a little bit later on because, more pressingly, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for the COP27 climate summit, joining fellow world leaders, albeit at the last minute. A little bit of a climate U-turn, wasn't it? In just under an hour's time, he will make a speech where he's expected to say the world must deliver on the legacy of last year's COP26 climate summit in Glasgow. The United Nations have said progress on cutting the emissions that cause global warming has been woefully inadequate since last year's event in the UK. But get this, and I want to know how you feel about this. Poorer countries in attendance are pushing for financial compensation, reparations really, for those who say that they are responsible for the most historical emissions. That includes the UK. So countries that developed earlier than them, therefore use more emissions, essentially now owe those people money. Again, I'm not really on board with that. I want to know where that money is coming from. We've got tax hikes, we've got cuts to public services, we've got energy crises, etc., etc., etc. How on earth can we afford to lob the Marshall Islands a load of wonga? Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has also turned up there, saying he was the, quote, spirit of Glasgow, referring to the UK summit last year. But he added that he was there in a supportive role and was glad that Rishi Sunak was attending. So there we go. What do you make of that? Reparations to smaller countries? Climate compensation? Not sure. We're a bit skint at the minute. Let's cross over now to Westminster and speak to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, thank you very, very much. Serious concern in the inbox here that Rishi Sunak might, quote, sell us out a little bit and we end up giving a shed load of cash to people for essentially being a developed nation. What do you think? What's going on?
Well, first of all, Patrick, with climate change or not, this is definitely not Sharm el-Sheikh. I can tell you at Westminster it's been raining and pretty cold all day. But you're right, there is this kind of discussion being had about whether there should be so-called reparations or whether Britain has a responsibility to transfer some money from itself and the global north to the global south, given our history. Now, interestingly, on this subject, Grant Shapps was asked about, Cabinet Minister, this morning. He was suggesting it's a discussion that should remain on the table. He frankly said that we industrialise first and we appreciate the rest of the world needs to be able to bring themselves along as well. I suppose his argument, he would say, or the people who support this, is that frankly, you know what, it is the developing world that is having the most impact from climate change or global warming, and that if we want to shuffle along in a certain direction, we're going to need to try and help them do it out. Now, that is not the case for everyone, not least of all, as you say, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is not a fan of this. He is at COP27 in Egypt. He's been speaking today. His argument is not to look backwards, he says, and trying to tot up the bill for loss and damage that the UK or other countries may have done. He says what the UK should try and do is help take countries forward and help them achieve the carbon reductions in green technologies and develop them instead. It's not looking back over 200 years of history, but rather, he would argue, trying to work out what is best in the future. Now, this is a debate that in some ways has been around for a while. It kind of came to the fore yesterday with Ed Miliband, Labour's shadow climate secretary, suggesting that he thought it was quite a good idea. But it is a reminder, I think, of the difficulties and complexities around all of this, and also about what can be achieved actually in Egypt. As you say, it is fascinating the Prime Minister has travelled there, maybe in part because Boris Johnson was going. Let's be honest about all of that. He is, though, Rishi Sunak, only there for a very short period of time. He is due to speak in just over an hour's time. And I think from him, we're going to have a little bit more of a better reflection, I think, of the difficulties in, i.e., trying to reach net zero, trying to become carbon neutral. That's the overall legal plan for the UK, but doing that in a way that means, at least in the immediate term, the UK can better manage what is frankly an energy crisis, and at a time in which there is a shortage of energy, whether it be green or not, in the years to come. So, yes, we're going to hear what the Prime Minister has to say, but there is no doubt that Boris Johnson does want to put his mark on all of this. I think as part of his legacy, he wants to keep reminding people of his green credentials following COP26 in Glasgow last year.
Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey outside Westminster for us as we build up to Rishi Sunak's big speech at around 4 p.m. We'll be taking that live here on GB News. Lots of people saying Rishi Sunak shouldn't be in Sharm el-Sheikh. He should be right here, back at home, sorting out the mess this country's in on several different fronts, whether it's to do with the migrant crisis, whether it's to do with our own energy bills, frankly. There could well be a nurses' strike. We're covering all of those things shortly. In fact, in about 15 minutes' time, we're going live, so stay tuned, live to the House of Commons, where Suella Braverman, our Home Secretary, is going to get grilled on the conditions in migrant detention centres. Some people already getting in touch. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Just quickly, paying climate change reparations. This is from William. William raises a cracking point here. If we have to give smaller nations money for essentially cracking on and developing, and some would argue being a better country quicker, how long is it before we start paying reparations for other things? And he's raised the point here, things like, slavery in America, for example. I would argue, what about Germany for, some of that nasty stuff? Lockdowns? Are we paying reparations for that? Some of the people responsible for them. The contaminated blood scandal. People have been after reparations there. Rightly so, in my opinion, for being given all sorts of horrible diseases that have, in some cases, well, in many cases, killed them. Are we getting more reparations quicker for them? I'm not sure we are. Well, as Darren was saying, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he rocked up in Egypt, big night out in Egypt for Bojo, saying he was the spirit of Glasgow, referring to the UK's summit last year. This is interesting. I'm going to do you a little fact file later on about what was achieved at COP26 last year and why, in my opinion, we don't need to do any more now. Warning against the Tories going soft on climate change. Boris said that he added, as well, he was there in a supportive role, was glad that Rishi Sunak was attending. Let's just take a quick look at what he said at one of the fringe events in Egypt earlier today.
I'm here in a purely supportive role, and to remind everybody remind the world of what we did at Glasgow, which I think was fantastic, and I'm genuinely proud of it. I think it was groundbreaking. I think the Glasgow Climate Pact was a great achievement, and I know that the present government also understands that and wants to take it forward. the PM's here, and I'm glad he's here. He's made an outstanding speech the other day. I think he's on absolutely the right lines. I'm here basically to make the key point I've made to you, which is I think that the risk is that some people will go weak and wobbly on net zero. We can't have that. And also just to remind everybody of the spirit of Glasgow, which, as I say, I propose to incarnate before you today.
What do you make of that? Popular chat, Boris Johnson, on this channel, but I suspect not really for his environmental views. Let's cross back now to Westminster, where I can speak to former Environment Secretary George Eustice. George, thank you very, very much. There was a lot that came out of COP26. Now we're at COP27, where it appears to me smaller nations are desperate to get more money for the fact that we essentially were able to develop quicker. We're skint. We shouldn't give them any. What's your view?
Well, actually, I think we made some really big progress last year at COP26. That was a ground-changing one where we made some new commitments, particularly on finance, actually, and countries like the United States followed our lead and started to actually come forward with more money. The UK's a leader in terms of funding. There's £11 billion earmarked through the international climate finance arrangement that we have, and around a third of that going on nature. And that's not changing at the moment. That's an important commitment. And it is important that the wealthier nations of the world do their bit to help some of the less developed countries decarbonise and also help protect forests in some of these countries, because we need to halt deforestation by 2030.
Yep, OK, all right. So no nuclear, really, no fracking. We're not allowed to go and just explore all the resources that are sitting under our feet right now, which some would argue increases our reliance on some dirty money oil states. It's a cesspit for human rights in the Middle East. Increases our reliance on people like Vladimir Putin. We are currently paying the price because a Swedish teenager kicked off about the climate. Do we have to keep doing that? We've got problems here at home. Why is Rishi Sunak over there?
Well, the first thing to say is obviously nuclear power is being built in this country, and some of the sort of smaller modular nuclear power stations are probably going to play quite a key role to decarbonising our electricity supply. You do need something to complement renewable resources like wind, so that you've got that base load reliability, and so that is a carbon neutral technology that's being supported. And when it comes to gas, there's a role for transition gas out to 2050. We're going to need to have hydrogen power in some areas on larger machinery, things like lorries and tractors. And you do need natural gas to do that. And you're right, it might as well be our own natural gas as somebody else's. So it doesn't mean halting the exploration of gas and stopping doing that. We're still going to need that in that transitional phase to produce hydrogen. But it does mean in the longer term trying to phase these out and have more renewable sources.
If Rishi Sunak commits this country to giving financial support for lesser, smaller, less developed countries, right in the middle of a cost of living crisis, right in the middle of his Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, who, as we understand it, is about to be advised by George Osborne, of all people, who's going to increase our taxes, cut public service spending and goodness knows what else as well. That is a massive... I'll tell you what, it's not net zero, it's a net loss for you at the next election, isn't it?
Well, look, we've got an international aid budget. It was reduced slightly last year due to the pressures on cost of living, and that was controversial, stepping back from that 0.7%. But even within that envelope of overseas aid, we have a very substantial commitment to international climate finance and also some important nature funds, things like the Darwin Fund that helps species recover in certain habitats right around the world.
Look, I get that, sorry, it's just we're pressed for time. I get that, sorry, and I appreciate you coming on, and you are always, game for this kind of stuff. I really do appreciate that, but I've got to ask, do you think it's really right that we could end up paying taxpayers' cash here to give to other countries, to help them decarbonise and stuff right now? I've got to get you on that. Do you think that's right?
Well, I think it's right in the sense that this is a global challenge and we've got a role to play. And if we don't tackle climate change and we don't halt global warming, and we're trying to keep it at 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees if we're able to, then actually the economy will be affected anyway. You will see vast tracts of land where currently we have agriculture where you won't be able to grow things anymore. You will have more flooding. There's a financial cost to that if you want to see it in financial terms only. We will see more species extinctions, and there's economic costs to that as well. So there are economic costs to not confronting the challenge of climate change.
All right, look, George, thank you very, very much. Really do appreciate it. Always appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much.
Former Environment Secretary George Eustice there. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? It's certainly a controversial issue here. We did obviously say that we were going to fork out a wedge of cash for the whole net zero agenda. We've currently, as far as I'm aware anyway, got some people tied up on a bridge on the M25. Just Stop Oil just won't stop, will they? Greta Thunberg, bless her, a Swedish teenager with a chip on her shoulder about the environment, has now managed to influence world policy. Are we about to witness our Prime Minister in about half an hour's time standing up before the world and committing us, you, me, everyone we know, to opening our wallets and giving it out to people like the Marshall Islands because, you know, the water levels are rising? How do you feel about that? Maybe you think it's the right thing to do, but Rishi Sunak is at COP26 discussing all of this, but he's also got another cracking point on the agenda, and it's one that I know a lot of you think is a lot more pressing, dare I say it, that things getting a bit hot. French President Emmanuel Macron is going to meet with him to see if we can do anything about solving what's going on in the Channel. We've given the French a shed load, I nearly swore then, of cash to try to stop small boats coming across the Channel. That's not worked, has it? Is anything going to work? The Prime Minister is meeting them as well as we're going to launch a British Bill of Rights, apparently, so lots for us to get stuck into here. It will allow the UK courts to, fingers crossed, ignore European case law a little bit more often. It comes after the European Convention on Human Rights grounded the first flight of asylum seekers to Rwanda because of a legal challenge. So this is this British Bill of Rights. Raab wanted to bring it in. It was deemed unworkable, apparently, so it might need a little bit of a refresh. But apparently it will also make it easier for us to deport foreign criminals. So it's not just people who come over the Channel who've claimed that they have a human right to a family life in this country. But they could, of course, be a threat to public safety. I'm going to talk now to a barrister, Rebecca Butler. Rebecca, thank you very, very much. So, give me a quick rundown, if that's all right, of what this British Bill of Rights is. It was biffed when Liz Truss came in. They said it was unworkable, but now it's back on the agenda because Raab's back.
Yeah, so this is Raab's piece of legislation, and he worked on this with Priti Patel. So really the only critical piece in the Bill of Rights is that Section 1, subsection 1, repeals the Human Rights Act. So the Human Rights Act is a domestic piece of legislation brought in by Tony Blair's government, Tony Blair's government, 1998. It was their manifesto promise that they would do that. And prior to the Human Rights Act 1998, the European Court of Human Rights was effectively an appellate jurisdiction. So you would run your way through all of the domestic UK courts and then end up pleading, if there was one, a human rights case to ECHR. The HRA 98 dissolved that, and they effectively made all human rights points arguable within the jurisdiction, anything from a tribunal upwards. So as you can imagine, Patrick, that created a huge amount of work, created massive backlogs in the system, and no doubt feathered some very large pockets as well.
I can imagine. So, just quickly on this, sorry to interrupt you. I just kind of want to really drill down a bit, because for our viewers and our listeners, I think the key points really are, if somebody comes over here on one of the small boats, or they are a criminal or anything, does it make it easier to deport people that we might not want in this country? And does it speed up the legal process in order to do that? Because that's what people care about.
Well, something that isn't often spoken about is Priti Patel's fantastic work on the Nationality and Borders Act. So that's really where the question is that you're asking us. ECHR issued an injunction on the Rwanda flight, but that was only a technicality, and we are awaiting a High Court judgment any time now on the legality of the Rwanda flights. That is in the Nationality and Borders Act, NABA, which was enacted this July. And ever since that act was enforced, from January of this year, if you enter into the UK by a non-legal route, that is automatically a criminal offence. So what they've done in the NABA is they have incentivised people to come through the safe and legal routes of migration, which, by the way, we do have many. People quite often say we don't have legal routes anymore. We actually do have legal routes, and we've created a new one. So, you know, if you're coming from a refugee country, you arrive in the UK with a visa. It doesn't matter what visa you've got. You can apply for a holiday visa, whatever, turn up, you know, book yourself into a hotel here for a lot less than it costs to go by dinghy and fly into Heathrow. You are going to be given a Group 1 asylum seekers permit, which incentivises people to do it through the legal routes.
Well, this is it, and you don't hear enough. This is the thing, you don't hear enough of this stuff, Rebecca. Thank you very much, because I'm absolutely sick and tired, day in, day out, and I'm going to clip this, actually, and play it to whenever we get someone on, which is almost every day, that says the opposite. OK, the only way you can come here now and expect anything is if you come over the channel and all of this stuff. I mean, it's nonsense. It's absolute tosh. Rebecca, thank you very much. Rebecca Butler, barrister, and I think going to fast become a friend of the show, actually. Great to have you on there. What do you make about this British Bill of Rights, ladies and gentlemen? In my book, if it means that we don't keep having to give the French a boatload of cash, if you'll excuse the pun there, to not police the channel, and if someone comes over here who we don't want in the country, we can get them taken off, preferably to Rwanda or Paraguay or whatever country that we've done a deal with, as quickly as possible, or someone commits a crime here, we can biff them as well. That's a good thing in my book. The British Bill of Rights. Oh, and nice little cherry on top of the cake. We might not have to have a judge from, I don't know, San Marino tell us that our law is a bit fruity. I couldn't care less what a judge in San Marino thinks. This is me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And coming up, Just Stop Oil protesters have been out again in force, pretending to cry. Did you see that go, oh, I've got to do this for my future? No, you don't. Leave them up there. Police say a total of 23 people have been arrested. The latest with our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who, for dramatic effect, might cry as well if we can make him. I'll be back in a mo.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Good afternoon. Before we go back to Patrick at 3:32, let's get you up to date with the latest headlines. The Prime Minister is due to address the COP27 climate conference in the next hour. Earlier, Rishi Sunak held bilateral talks with his French counterparts, embracing Emmanuel Macron as they met on the sidelines of the summit. They've been addressing the migrant crisis, discussing ongoing cooperation in a bid to try to prevent people from crossing the Channel illegally. Well, the world's leaders have been told action on climate change is either collective solidarity or a collective suicide pact. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says we're in the fight of our lives and we're losing. He's calling for a universal early warning system within the next 5 years and for all governments to impose a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies. Well, as climate concerns are discussed in Egypt, here environmental protesters have been disrupting traffic on England's busiest motorway. 23 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after police were forced to shut sections of the motorway this morning when demonstrators climbed gantries. Measures to prevent the spread of bird flu have come into force across England. All poultry and captive birds must now be kept indoors as the UK faces its largest outbreak of avian flu. The virus has been discovered at over 90 properties and found in more than 200 dead wild birds since the start of October. Prince William has spoken about mental health in a conversation with footballers Harry Kane and Declan Rice ahead of the World Cup, which begins in under a fortnight. His Royal Highness has collaborated with the Tottenham and West Ham players for a podcast with the media company Copper90, where they shared the mic in support of mental well-being. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of the markets. The pound will buy you $1.1463 and €1.1470. The price of gold is at £1,464.39 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,304 points.
Welcome back, people. Happy Monday. I hope you had a good rest over the weekend because we're getting stuck right into it now. Shortly, as we understand it, we're going to go live to the House of Commons where either Suella Braverman or someone from the Home Office is going to tell us what on earth is going on at these migrant detention centres. An urgent question there, one that I know all of you really care about, so make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that. Shortly, though, in fact, right now, a total of 23 people have been arrested after Just Stop Oil protesters climbed gantries over the M25. When will it end? Activists scaled 8 gantries and closed sections of the motorway in both directions. Thousands of commuters tried to get to work, while motorists, of course, were at a standstill around several of these junctions in Surrey, Hertfordshire, London and Essex. The Met Police have also launched what they say is a significant operation to identify and arrest those that it suspects of preparing motorway destruction. So kind of proactive arrests, getting in there before they get in there, making 3 arrests last night. With me live in the studio right now is GB News' Home and Security Editor. It's Mark White. Now, I've been reliably informed that Mark White is not going to pretend to cry during this particular piece of footage. You don't have to pretend when you're next to me.
I'm a tough Scot. We never cry.
No, but somebody else did, didn't they?
Yeah, one of the protesters that was up on the gantry on the M25. Just Stop Oil now, in order to get maximum publicity, make their own videos and send them out to the media. And, of course, it's been getting aired widely across the media this afternoon. This is Louise. She's 24, and she told us why she's decided to be up there and taking no responsibility for that action herself.
I'm here because I don't have a future. And you might hate me for doing this, and you're entitled to hate me. But I wish you would direct all that anger and hatred at our government. They are betraying young people like me. I wouldn't have to be there if they did their lawful duty to their own citizens.
It's a waste of a private education, if you ask me, but there we go. So what's the result of this now? Is she now down from the gantry?
Down and arrested. All of those that were up on the gantries, and they were at multiple locations really all around the M25, effectively bringing that orbital motorway to a standstill for quite a few hours today. They are now in breach of a court injunction that was granted by National Highways.
Sorry, Mark, sorry. Rather predictably, live now to the House of Commons where Sir Roger Gale is raising an urgent question about the
overcrowding at the Manston Asylum Processing Facility. And also, could he make a statement about the safeguarding of minors, both at Manston and in hotels?
Mr. Speaker, we have set out on multiple occasions the global migration crisis is playing an unprecedented strain on our asylum system. Despite what they may have been told by many, migrants who travel through safe countries should not put their lives at risk by making the dangerous and illegal journey to the United Kingdom. We're steadfast in our determination to tackle those gaming the system, and will use every tool at our disposal to deter illegal migration and disrupt the business model of people smugglers. So far this year, our French colleagues have prevented over 29,000 crossings and destroyed over 1,000 boats. Furthermore, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, will be speaking with President Macron this week about how together we can achieve our shared ambition to prevent further crossings. Some 40,000 people so far this year, and the government continues to have a statutory
Robert Jenrick for a little while anyway, discussing these migrant detention centres, the processing centres, overcrowding, reports of violence, regular police calls. I actually spoke to a chap on Friday who's in one of the migrant hotels. This one was in Windsor, didn't like the food, didn't like the accommodation. I believe we can go back now, potentially, in a second anyway, to the House of Commons, where we're going to hear from Robert Jenrick. But I've got Mark White with me in the studio. Mark White, Home and Security Editor. Mark, there were some concerning reports, I think, over the weekend about a power outage and a little bit of a kerfuffle at a migrant centre, a hotel, I think, was it?
No, this is Harmondsworth Removal Centre. This is the last link in the chain if you are being deported out of the country, either as a failed asylum seeker, another immigrant offender, or indeed someone of foreign nationality who has committed an offence, been jailed for that, and then are deemed not to be in the conducive to the public good, they're remaining in the country. So they are held at this secure detention centre and other detention centres prior to leaving the country. So Harmondsworth is near Heathrow, and on Friday night into Saturday, there was disturbances there, levels of violence.
Were they armed?
They had managed to get hold of makeshift weapons and had left their rooms, had gone into a courtyard within Harmondsworth, created significant problems for the authorities. Metropolitan Police had to assist with their territorial support group, public order officers. The prison service had to send their public order trained teams. They have a national unit that also attended the Harmondsworth Detention Centre with a view to ending that protest, which they did. after a number of hours.
Yeah, OK, Mark, look, thank you very, very much. I mean, there's going to be a lot to talk to you about today as well, because we understand that Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, is going to be meeting with Emmanuel Macron. That's in Sharm el-Sheikh at COP27, but not about the environment, thankfully. It's going to be about whether or not we can get the French to potentially, dare I say it, pull their finger out and stop some of the boats. Are we going to end up giving them more money? I believe we're maybe crossing back to House of Commons now, are we? No, we're not. Apparently, we're going straight to you guys. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on what we've been discussing throughout the course of this show. Eco-protests, Mike says, just stop oil protesters go a bit too far. I worry about their safety. I worry about them being indoctrinated, to be honest with you, Mike. I'd quite like to do a little bit of a deep dive into what I think is fast becoming a cult. And we see people there crying on bridges, saying the world's going to end and they've got no future. I want to know who's filling their heads with this rubbish. But on the nurses' strike, Bruce says, and this is important, this actually, one of the key issues that I'm discussing with you throughout the show, gbviews@gbnews.uk, is about this potential nurses' strike. 300,000 people were balloted for the Royal College of Nursing, and they voted in favour of strike action unless they get around a 15% pay rise. Got a dollop of cash earlier this year, got a dollop of cash earlier the year before. I wonder whether or not if they go on strike, people will die. If they do, I think they've got blood on their hands. But Bruce says, I have no sympathy for NHS workers that are going on strike. A strike will solve nothing. They and other NHS workers had jobs when many were losing theirs and small businesses were going under during COVID lockdowns. It's an inconvenient truth, isn't it? And I wonder where you all sit on this. No doubt people will be watching this now, shouting at their TV screens, just saying, you've got to give them a pay rise. These people save lives. And I get that school of thought. I absolutely get it. But when they use the argument they need a pay rise because of what they did during COVID, yeah, right, thank you very much. But everybody else did their bit during COVID as well, didn't they? The lockdowns during COVID, isolation during COVID, that was to help protect the NHS. Businesses going out of business, people being financially shattered during the coronavirus, that was to protect the NHS. Did we not do our bit as well? Do we now have to pay extra? Do we owe, as the taxpayer, nurses more money? I am of the school of thought that we don't, but maybe you disagree with me. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Maybe you think I'm heartless. Matheus has been in touch, cracking name, who says, I just wonder if the nurses are going to be paid for the working day whilst they're on strike. They shouldn't be allowed to strike. If they're not happy with the pay, they're free to go. Problem there is, I suppose, we end up maybe with no nurses and then we all die as opposed to just a few people whilst they're on strike. But I do take your point. How do you feel about this idea? Should it be illegal for nurses to strike? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Coming up, more on this very topic, the nurses' strike. Are they selfish? Do you think they're going to put lives at risk? I want to know your views on all of that. All right, we'll be back in a tick. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Right, it's 4:45, ladies and gentlemen. This is Patrick Christys on GB News. Shortly, we're going to be hearing from Rishi Sunak live at COP27. A lot of people say, what on earth is he doing in Sharm el-Sheikh? Shouldn't he be here sorting out various different messes this country is in? Should we really be paying money for small nations, tiny little nations, to say, oh, sorry, we decided to develop before you and now we owe you money for an environmental disaster? I'm not sure we do. And also, as well, Rishi Sunak is going to be speaking to Emmanuel Macron to see whether or not the French are going to bother to do anything about the channel. I suspect they're not, which is why we need a British Bill of Rights. Another topic we're covering. It's the absolute lot of it today. But first, on the agenda, one of the crises that I think Rishi Sunak should be back at home sorting out and not over in Egypt. The Royal College of Nursing is set to announce the results of its ballot on strike action later this week. Sources are claiming a large majority have voted to walk out. It is the first time the Royal College of Nursing has balloted all of its 300,000 members for strike action in its 106-year history. So, outpatient surgery, day surgery, this is the big, well, a couple of big ones here, chemotherapy and dialysis are some of the services which could be disrupted. Despite the fact we're all being told, oh, it will be non-urgent, won't it? The Royal College of Nursing is demanding nurses receive a cost of living pay rise of 5% above inflation, which currently sits at 12.3%. So this would give the average nurse, who earns roughly £35,600 each year, an extra £6,150 annually. Is your wage going up, by the way? At least half of nurses at each NHS organisation and trust need to vote in favour of industrial action for the strikes to go ahead locally, which could trigger varying levels of service across the country. Joining me on the show right now is Julia Taylor, who is an NHS psychiatric nurse. Thank you very, very much. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether or not you were balloted. I'm hoping you can tell me. If so, are you going to go on strike? Do you support a strike? Talk to me.
No, I don't support a strike, and no, I'm not going on strike. And yes, I was balloted. I was asked by Unison if I wanted to strike, but I've thought about this and I haven't actually sent the reply back. I just thought I'm not doing it. And that to me counted as my no. But really, looking back on it, I should have said no, so they're clear that that's my intention. I won't strike. However, I certainly won't condemn anybody for doing that, because it's not just about the money, Patrick. We're very short-staffed. We're having to use agency nurses that might not know that particular job, that speciality. So we're having to do extra work. We're finishing late. Sometimes we're starting early. We're not attracting nurses into the profession at all. Student nurses leave their nurses training with £60,000 worth of debt. I mean, can you imagine starting your life off with £60,000 worth of debt? Why would anybody want to be going to that profession?
Julia, I've gone on record and said that I do think one way of trying to help out with a staffing crisis and a recruitment crisis is to do something nationally where we don't make student nurses pay fees, right, for university fees. I don't think there'd be a massive pushback across the nation for that. That seems to me to be an obvious recruitment drive that could actually help sort us out. I am bang against the strike, and the reason why I'm bang against this strike is if I went on strike, no one would really notice and certainly no one would die, right? But if someone can't get chemotherapy or dialysis, say, that's catastrophic as far as I'm concerned. And I can't help but say, no matter what I think the reasons are, they'd have blood on their hands if they went on strike. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not so sure if is that actually true, that because I haven't heard that the people having chemotherapy and things like that
potentially it's one of the areas. It's one of the areas that they're saying would be, quotes, non-urgent, because they're not really. Well, some people would be in ICU if they needed chemo, obviously, but some people wouldn't be, and some of those areas would fall short of the urgent care that wouldn't be affected.
Yeah, my issue is, how many times are we going to have to do this, though? Look at the rail workers. They've been on strike day after day after day after day. And that would be, if I went on strike, that's 4 patients I wouldn't see in that one day. And that's like, if we do it day after day after day after day, that's 4, 8, 12, 16 patients just by having 4 days off on a strike. It's crazy. I can't bring myself to do it. I can't bring myself to go on strike because sadly, the government in a way have got us over the barrel because of people like me, and people might call me spineless.
I don't think you're spineless at all. I don't think you're spineless at all. I think you're an absolute hero. And there is this difference between, you know, I don't not want nurses to be paid well for the job that they do. I mean, you'd have to be, you know, an out-and-out Satanist, frankly, to not want people who save lives to be paid well for the job that they do. Don't get me wrong, but the idea of walking out when the ramifications of that could mean that people's health suffers, I think that moves the dial a little bit, and I think that changes the nature of what we're talking about here. One of the big things I'm keen to get your take on is this idea that we owe nurses because of what happened during the COVID pandemic. Now, great work was done there, worked through a pandemic, must have been an absolute nightmare, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, the nation did lock down. People did suffer financially as a result of that. People didn't see loved ones as a result of that. And the idea that the only people who really suffered during the coronavirus were nurses or medical professionals, I think is a bit inaccurate. And I just wonder your take on whether or not the rest of the nation now owes nurses money because of the way that the pandemic unfolded.
I don't really necessarily agree with that. The shop workers, people going to people's houses delivering food, takeaways, they all stayed open as well. Where's their pay rise? That does bother me. But I certainly don't feel personally that I should be held in some kind of esteem because I worked through the pandemic or my colleagues worked through the pandemic. That certainly isn't something on the top of my agenda at all. My thoughts are really they don't need to use more of the taxpayers' money. They just need to spend the money more wisely. As a good, for instance, I don't know if you're aware of this, but every year on average, the NHS spends 423 million on agency workers. Now, you end up working with an agency worker while you're on shift, and they're sometimes getting double what you're getting. That's really aggravating, that, you know.
No, that
good on them. If they've obviously thought, well, the NHS isn't paying me enough money, I'll go and work in the private sector. But the fact the government haven't actually addressed that yet makes me worry that that's what they actually want in the long run.
Well, that would wind me right up if someone is, you know, getting more money, double the money that you're getting for doing the same job simply because they're not actually working in the NHS. I do understand that. But look, thank you very, very much, Julia. It's been fantastic to have you on the show. I don't think we've spoken before, but I'd love to chat to you again. I think this issue is going to rumble on, and keep up the good work, and thank you for everything that you do. Julia Taylor there is an NHS psychiatric nurse, pretty strongly there, saying she can't bring herself to strike. She wouldn't bring herself to strike because of the effect that would have on patients and on general public well-being. And look, she also said, and this is my school of thought, I don't buy into the fact that we now owe the nursing profession a shed load of cash because of what happened during the pandemic. You know, it wasn't like we were all living it large, was it? Anyway, we're going to return to this throughout the show. My email inbox is popping off in front of me here, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get them coming in because we're going to talk about that throughout. But get this. This is something a little bit lighter, OK? The plot of Lord Lucan and his disappearance has thickened, OK? We all know the Lord Lucan stuff. A facial recognition expert believes that he has matched the face of this British aristocrat with the elderly man in Australia. So Lord Lucan vanished in 1974 after 29-year-old Sandra Rivett, who worked for him, was bludgeoned to death in his Belgravia home. So Professor Ugale, who was able to unmask the Skripal poisoners, has claimed now that his computer algorithm has never been wrong. Interesting this, because for absolutely yonks, journalists on Fleet Street used to say, I think we might have a lead on Lord Lucan. He's in the Caribbean, and they get a 2-week holiday in the Caribbean. They speak to some old codger, realise it wasn't Lord Lucan, and come home with a suntan. But joining me now to discuss the development of facial recognition technology and whether or not, finally, we found Lord Lucan, is Jake Moore, who is a global cybersecurity advisor. Jake, whether or not we have found Lord Lucan, I feel a bit squiffy about the idea that we've got this facial recognition stuff now. What do you make of it?
Well, there's been a huge improvement in artificial intelligence and facial recognition, and together they make a very powerful algorithm. They're trained by millions of photos, and they're using all this data, which we're finding all over the world, to effectively show where people are. And that information, in the wrong hands, could actually be quite dangerous. So we do need to make sure that we're keeping this type of information on people's faces secure. And that's where I think about the big worry is about the cybersecurity angle on this story. But has it happened? Well, there's a good chance that this could actually be who they say it is.
OK, all right. Just talk to me a bit about this, because I understand that there was facial recognition that was tried out. I believe it was in Milton Keynes, but I wanted to be corrected on that. And some people were matched with murderers, and it just wasn't them. And I feel quite uncomfortable about the idea that so I might end up wanted for a murder that I've not committed based on some computer saying that I look like someone else.
Well, that's exactly it. You do get inaccuracies. We're not at the same level as we are with, say, DNA or our fingerprints from physical evidence at a murder scene, for example. We're still in the early phases of this new technology. And it is incredible. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, they do a fantastic job. But with this infant phase that we are currently in, we shouldn't be using it as 100% proof for evidence at the moment. This might be a pioneering case that we might talk about in the future. But at the moment, we do have to think there could still be that inaccuracy. I think the professor has said something like it's got to be over 76% sure to confirm a match. And he calls it a fact. Well, I think that's a little bit hard at the moment, but it is going in the right direction.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to be funny, but, you know, if you pop the question to your missus or your partner or whatever, and you said, do you want to marry me? And she said, well, I'm 76% sure that I do. I wouldn't take that as a resounding success, to be perfectly honest with you. Jake Moore, thank you very much, a global cybersecurity advisor, talking about the fact that maybe facial recognition is matched with Lord Lucan, and that geezer has now been found, apparently. We'll have to wait and see. Apparently they did facial recognition surgery on me, and it's a straight match for Brad Pitt. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right, coming up, we'll have the latest from COP27. That's the climate summit in Egypt, where for some reason Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, has decided to go to, instead of sorting out the mess he's got over here. He will, however, be talking to Emmanuel Macron. Apparently, we are going to come to some resolution with the French about solving what's going on in the Channel. I suspect we're going to lob them a load of euros, and they are just going to lob us a load of illegal immigrants in return. We'll have more on the migrant crisis in general, the nurses' strike as well. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Loads to get stuck into there. Don't be shy, everyone. I'll be back in a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
Welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. And very shortly, apparently, we're going to be going to Sharm el-Sheikh, it's all right for some, where Rishi Sunak is due to speak to delegates at the COP27 climate conference. Look, loads of strong opinions on this, and I want to hear from you. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Plenty of people think he shouldn't be there. He wasn't going to go there. Then Boris Johnson rocked up, so he had to be there. Are we going to end up being shackled to pay ridiculous reparations and compensation to smaller countries because we develop quicker and therefore we damage the environment a little bit more? How on earth can Rishi Sunak stand next to Jeremy Hunt at the dispatch box and have him ramp up taxes for you and I, have him cutting the cost for public service and all this stuff, and at the same time lob a load of cash over to the Marshall Islands or somewhere like that? No, I'm sorry, I'm not having it. We've got foreign aid, and that's that as far as I'm concerned. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We're supposedly, anyway, going to be hearing from Dishy Rishi very, very shortly. But also on the PM's agenda, and I would argue, more importantly, he's going to meet the French President Emmanuel Macron today to thrash out an agreement on how to stop small boats in the Channel. I would argue that he should tell Emmanuel Macron to swivel. We've given the French a load of cash for a very, very long time now, and they've done naff all in the Channel. I think they're taking our money and they are laughing at us. The thing that we need to do is another big topic for us today, right here on GB News, the British Bill of Rights. Dominic Raab wanted to bring it in. He then left the government. It was told that it was unworkable. They wanted to do something else. Now it's back on the agenda. Why is this important, you may be asking? Well, I will tell you, because it might remove the interference of foreign judges in our courts, it might speed up deportations, and it might mean that we can get people on planes out of this country if we don't want them here. So people coming across the small boats on the Channel, people who are criminals, for example, it might being the key word, give us, shock horror, control over our borders. Is it time for a British Bill of Rights? And nurses, are they selfish to strike? Apparently, the vast majority of nurses in the Royal College of Nursing have voted to go on strike. I'm absolutely sickened by this because they want something in the range of a 15 to 17% pay rise. They say that we owe them as a result of their work during the lockdown and the pandemic. Personally, I'm not sure we do because we all suffered as a result of that, frankly. Yes, they do a good job. Yes, maybe they need a bit more cash. But if people die as a result of a nurse's strike, I'm sorry, I think the optics of that are absolutely shocking. Where do you stand on the nurses' strike? Do you think they should be on strike? Do you think actually it is selfish? All of that coming your way. Make sure you keep your eyes peeled because soon we're going to be going to Rishi Sunak. Will he sell us out, people? Will Rishi Sunak sell us out at COP27? But right now, it's your latest headlines with the wonderful Tatiana.
Thank you, Patrick. 3 minutes past 4. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is due to address the COP27 climate conference later this hour. Earlier, Rishi Sunak held bilateral talks with his French counterpart, embracing Emmanuel Macron as they met on the sidelines of the summit. They've been addressing the migrant crisis, discussing ongoing cooperation in a bid to try to prevent people from crossing the Channel illegally. The Prime Minister says it's a complex issue, but he's determined to get a grip on the situation.
We all want this situation to resolve itself as quickly as possible. I also want to be honest with people that it's a complex issue. It's not one simple solution that's going to solve it overnight. I wouldn't be being honest if I said that there was. There's a range of things we need to do. But what I want people to be reassured by that I absolutely am determined to grip this. I've been spending an enormous amount of my own time on it. I've been talking to several European leaders about it today. And there's a range of things that we will action as quickly as we can to get a grip of this situation and reduce the amount of illegal migration that we're seeing.
The COP27 summit has also been told the world's action on climate change is either a collective solidarity or collective suicide pact. The UN Secretary-General says countries need a clear, financed roadmap to prevent irreversible climate chaos. Antonio Guterres is calling for a universal early warning system within the next 5 years and for all governments to impose a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies. He says we're in the fight of our lives and we're losing.
The two largest economies, the United States and China, have a particular responsibility to join efforts to make this pact a reality. And this is our only hope of meeting our climate goals. Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. It is either a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact.
World leaders gather to discuss climate concerns. Environmental protesters have been disrupting traffic on England's busiest motorway. 23 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after police were forced to shut sections of the M25 this morning when demonstrators climbed gantries. Measures to prevent the spread of bird flu have come into force across England. All poultry and captive birds must now be kept indoors as the UK faces its largest outbreak of avian flu. The virus has been discovered at over 90 properties and found in more than 200 dead wild birds since the start of October. Tom Koppas, who's the manager at Koppas Turkey, says there's no risk to humans.
It's not a risk of human health. No, there is no. I've been had that and good assurance as well. Even if it was an infected bird, it's completely safe for a human to eat. It's more about trying to stop the spread of this disease and the spread of the disease through wild birds because of the huge effects it has. And obviously, it's currently in poultry. We don't want to see it jump to other breeds, whether it jumps to pigs or something like that. We want to obviously contain it to poultry.
There's ongoing disruption to rail services today, despite train strikes being called off. RMT cancelled the action after securing the promise of a pay offer from train companies. The late suspension of the walkout, though, means many operators are only running a reduced timetable. Network Rail says there's quite a mixed picture of delays and cancellations, depending on the train operator. A service has been held to mark the opening of the Royal British Legion's Field of Remembrance. The field at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire pays tribute to those who have lost their lives in conflict from World War I to the present day. It will be open to the public to pay their respects until the end of the month. Prince William has opened up about mental health in a conversation with footballers Harry Kane and Declan Rice ahead of the World Cup, which begins in under a fortnight. His Royal Highness, along with the Tottenham and West Ham players, have collaborated for a podcast with media company Copper90, where they shared the mic in support of mental well-being. The Prince of Wales opened up about how past England football losses affected him, along with the nation.
Handling some of those really disappointing England results in the past. That was hard. I found that really difficult because, again, the same euphoria that we had comes crashing down and whittles away, and that's quite hard to take because you feel all on a high, you feel all together, and then suddenly normal life just gets back on again, and it's like, well, where did that all go? Was that real? What happened? And how do I get that feeling back? And yet football has that ability to just put it all on a plate for you and then suddenly just take it all away.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, Patrick, it is back to you.
All right, people, strap yourselves in because I've got a sinking feeling that potentially we're going to hear from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in Sharm el-Sheikh at COP27's climate summit very shortly, where he's going to outline anyway a global mission for clean growth. And I can't help but fear that's going to mean that you and I and everyone we know are going to end up paying more money. It seems to go that way, as if tax hikes weren't enough, cuts to public services. We can't possibly go for growth in our own economy. No, that wouldn't please the markets. So what we've got to do is do things like give millions to lesser countries, in my opinion, because they didn't develop as quickly as us and therefore didn't damage the environment as much. But as discussion will take place where the richer countries are facing criticism from poorer countries are pushing now for financial compensation. They say it's a responsibility for historical emissions, and that includes the UK. Now, can I just ask where this ends? Do we go and ask Germany for more cash because of, all of that absolutely shocking stuff that took place not once but twice, especially the second time? Lockdowns? Do we go after people who thought the lockdowns were a good idea? They've massively damaged our economy. People were pushing that. Does Chris Whitty have to go and pay reparations, even though we've got a massive backlog in the NHS? Contaminated blood scandals, they're doing their best now to not pay out for victims there. France allegedly stealing some of our vaccines. The slavery issue in America, are we giving out reparations there? Where would this end? Downing Street has insisted the UK was already helping countries deal with the impacts of climate change. Yes, well, we are, aren't we? Also, we've got a thing called foreign aid. And if you ask me, we're giving out rather too much in that. In fact, foreign aid now is going to count housing some people that are coming over the channel. Not before time, if you ask me. I personally don't think that we owe anyone anything for the fact that we developed a lot quicker than other nations. If anything, I think that was a bonus. But there we go. Key pledges were made last year at COP26 in Glasgow. This is important, OK? So COP26 last year in Glasgow, remember Greta Thunberg rocked up and all those eco-warriors decided to climb on board. We need to talk a bit more, by the way, about the fact that we appear now to be drawing up a global environmental policy because of an angry Swedish teenager. But let's have a look at some key elements that were agreed at COP26, which was just a year ago. It was agreed that countries would meet in 2022 to pledge further cuts to carbon dioxide emissions. OK, so we're cutting CO2, right, fine. There was an explicit plan to reduce the use of coal. There we are, so reducing the use of coal. It pledged to significantly increase money, here we go, to help poor countries cope with the effects of climate change and make the switch to clean energy. And while fossil fuel subsidies, world leaders agreed to phase out subsidies that artificially lower the price of coal, oil or natural gas. It's worth also bearing in mind, isn't it, the things like, oh, we're going to ban fracking, so we can't use some of the resources that I am currently sitting on right now. We can't use that. Just stop oil, climbing bridges every 2 minutes, saying that we can't, well, use more oil, for example. So it is costing us, and then we're relying now on, I would argue, human rights cesspits in the Middle East to provide us with various different oil and fossil fuels, etc. Putin as well. Why have we got ourselves in this particular mess now? Well, we're reliant on people like this. I just don't see why we need to be shipping a load of money off to the Marshall Islands, for example. We're going to cross live now to Westminster to speak to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, thank you very, very much. Rishi Sunak due to be talking any moment now, and he's going to say, well, what is he going to say? You fill us in.
Well, he's going to talk about, I think, the challenges that this all faces, this climate change debate, what faces the UK. I think in certain respects, Patrick, first of all, that he will make it clear that he views this as a threat to the UK and indeed to the world. He'll make it clear that he's committed to that net zero target, which is legally binding in the UK. He will make it clear that the UK government is prepared to spend more money on all of this. But he will also, I think, allude to the fact that, you know, it's not quite as simple as all of that, not least of all when we are in the midst of an energy crisis, which means that, you know, we cannot simply at this very moment in time entirely rely on green energy, renewable energy to get us through this crisis. So in many regards, it's going to be a bit more of a, I would say, like kind of finesse speech or a complex speech in terms of how you're going to try and tackle the global crisis when it comes to climate change, as some would portray it. It is in contrast slightly, though, to Boris Johnson, who actually is very much, I would suggest, pinned a kind of green flag to his mask, if you like, talking today about how you cannot frack your way out of this. He is saying that he is the spirit, he embodies the spirit of COP26 in Glasgow. He is trying to make, in some ways, the case that he is the person who's going to keep Rishi Sunak on the green agenda. But there is a difference when it comes to this idea of reparations between the former Prime Minister and the current one. It seems that Rishi Sunak is prepared to keep the idea of transferring money from the wealthy, industrialised global north to the less well-developed global south. He wants to keep that on the table as a possibility, as Grant Shapps was talking about today, whereas Boris Johnson said it's not the best way forward. He says the best way to fix this is not to look backwards, Patrick, and try to tot up some bills for loss and damage that the UK and other countries have done, but try to look at what the UK can do to help take these countries forward and to help them achieve carbon reductions and the use of green technologies as well. So arguing, yes, while it's really important, he would say, to get to that net zero target and to help poorer countries along, this idea of transferring large sum of monies is not the way forward. But in the end, ultimately, what are they in COP for? You know, we saw that Glasgow didn't make a massive difference last year. Will Egypt make a big difference this year? I'm not entirely sure. And is the reason Rishi Sunak, Patrick, ultimately is there is actually less to do with making a speech there today, but rather to be a counterweight to Boris Johnson. There is still a battle, I would suggest, going on between a former Prime Minister and our current Prime Minister.
Darren, look, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor at Westminster. Some people may argue that battle now between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson is who can become less popular with the Tory base and how fast can they do it, because I'm not really sure. The idea that we had a load of these changes when it came to COP26 last time around, and loads of these pledges, and people feeling the pinch now economically as a result of net zero, etc. And now, this year, appears to be about squeezing more money out of us. But there we go. John Grant joins me. He's a senior lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change at Sheffield Hallam University. John, thank you very, very much. A lot of people in this country might be thinking, why on earth do we owe any money whatsoever to less developed nations as a result of climate change? They say it's for the damage that we've done. Some people say, well, they should have just caught up faster.
The damage is ongoing and it's increasing. So if we don't help them, we will create a cascade event that will come home eventually. What we have to do is to hold the line with these countries. You know, we started this economic growth that has given us a great deal, but now we have the technology to make that switch, and we should be leading that. There are opportunities as well as costs. In fact, I would argue this is more of an investment than it is a cost, because when these countries survive and when they transition away from oil, gas and coal, they will be looking to develop their greener technologies. And if this government develops those technologies here, who can export to them? We could export to them. It could.
Yeah, but look, I'll tell you what, I've got to be honest with you, John. I'm hearing a lot of ifs. I'm hearing a lot of coulds. I'm hearing a lot of maybes. But there's someone probably called Doreen in Lancashire right now who can't heat her own home because of the energy costs. And instead of us doing things like investing in nuclear earlier on or just, you know, fracking in what's below my feet right now, all of a sudden she's got to pay more tax to lob it over to the Marshall Islands. I think I know which way she's voting on that one.
Well, yes, but in 2015, we had a campaign to improve people's homes, and we just threw that out. If we'd have improved the performance of these people's houses, including Doreen's house, she'd be paying potentially half of what she is paying now. Okay. And that would only go down as we pursue this aggressively. And who would be improving those houses? Workers here in the UK, and companies here in the UK would be producing the technology that would be being put in those houses. So, you know, there has to come a point where we draw a line and make things better for us, rather than being gouged by companies, the oil and gas companies, so that our money heads off abroad rather than staying here in the UK.
Some people think as well, Britain does more than enough. Why don't we go after the likes of China, who, let's be honest with you, won't stick to any of this anyway? We can sit around all day long and talk about Rishi Sunak going to Sharm el-Sheikh, probably flew there for a start, to discuss about how much now the British taxpayer should pay to help out some lesser countries. Meanwhile, China cracks on and none of what we do matters.
Well, it does matter, because every small amount of difference that we improve is an improvement.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I don't think it does. Every small amount matters. Yeah. Right, fine. But unless China does something about it, then none of it really matters.
So who will China turn to when they want to change? Because let me tell you, China's just coming out of the worst drought that they've ever had. They want to change their technology, but they don't have technology that can deliver the energy density that they need to keep their manufacturing going. And who's got the technology? Who's got the know-how? Well, we could be developing how to make low-carbon steel and export that. You know, our low-carbon clean coal technology was cut by the Conservatives 3 decades ago. That could have helped, but, you know, that was throwing the baby out with the bathwater when the coal mines were crushed.
I love your optimism,
so, you know, there are technologies out there.
John, I must say, I really love your optimism, and I do enjoy this back and forth, I must say. And you know what? You seem like a really lovely guy, and maybe we need more people in the world like you. I am deeply cynical, because I just think that China will pay people over here to go over there and teach them how to get that technology, and then they'll copy it for cheaper, like they've done with everything else. But anyway, John, I've got to get going, but I'll have you back on. Thank you very much, John. John Grant there. He's a senior lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change at Sheffield Hallam University. There we go. Anyway, here's the big issue I want you to get in touch about today, and it's not COP27. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't even think Rishi Sunak should be there. He should be right here sorting out an issue like this one, nurses. I'm asking, is it selfish if nurses go go on strike over pay. Not just a little bit of pay, between 15 and 17% pay rise they want. A lot of people have been getting in touch on this already. Are they putting their purses ahead of patients? I went to an A&E department earlier today. I'm going to play the clip shortly. I just want to read you a couple of emails that I've had very, very quickly first. And yes, here we go. This is from Richard. He says he's been working in the NHS for the past 20 years. He chose not to strike. He says that he doesn't fancy it at all and he thinks this is absolutely bang out of order. But this is important. And this is from Dawn. He says, Patrick, I just want to say the nurses are going to food banks, or so they say. She says she worked in a supermarket. She worked all the way through COVID and now receives £10.20 an hour. Nurses are on more than double her wage, she says. She says it makes her angry. I think pop goes the myth that we now owe nurses because of what they did during the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you very much. Really great. Can't thank you enough for all of that. But actually, well, I can thank you enough because I don't think you deserve a 17% pay rise because I couldn't see my grandma throughout the course of that. Businesses went out of business. All of this lockdown stuff. Do we really need to? We paid the price. We paid the price. Anyway, I went to an A&E earlier to ask nurses and patients what they thought about the strike. Let's have it.
Something has to be done.
You would die for a nurses' strike?
I would absolutely do anything that I possibly can. Die not because they will find someone. They won't let anybody die. They will delay services.
That could lead to death, though, couldn't it?
I'm severely ill. I've had 24 operations on the...
Gosh, sorry about that.
Thank you. And I can tell you 100% that these people won't let anybody die.
15%, that's a lot. 8%, yeah. But 15% is a lot.
We're really short of staff. We're not really paid well. There's really a shortness of resources as well. Everyone sees their little circle and their life. So obviously from what we do, we care for people. I care for patients in intensive care. Without us, what are they going to do? So obviously for us, what we're paid is not worth what we're doing.
Considering the hours that they put in and the lives that they save and the hard work.
15%.
15% it sounds fair to me.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, everybody who has been getting in touch. And this is a massive issue that I want to talk to you about throughout the course of the day. People getting in touch on both sides, but the vast majority of views so far, just judging by my inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk, as I've said, appear to be pretty much against this nurses' strike. And for me, it boils down to this, OK? They've had 2 pay rises in 2 years, all right, not necessarily a huge amount, but 2 pay rises in 2 years. They want between a 15 and 17% pay rise right now. And in the meantime, people might not be able to get chemo, they might not be able to get dialysis, there is a backlog of care. Did we not already pay the price for nurses during lockdown? They say they did a cracking job. They did do a cracking job, but I wasn't allowed to work. A lot of people weren't allowed to work. People weren't allowed to see their relatives. Businesses went out of business and we're paying a financial price for it. At what point do we go, right, thank you very much for your service. It was a pandemic and we all had to sacrifice in different ways. I don't know, what do you think? gbviews@gbnews.uk. But coming up, French President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak are meeting to hold talks about the issues about the UK facing illegal migrants crossing the Channel. Yet another massive waste of money. I don't understand why we're lobbing a load of money over to the French. They're laughing at us. We need a British Bill of Rights, or we need something that can get people out of this country. Sharpish, frankly. I'll be back in a mo.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across
We are the People's Channel. Let's talk about the channel, because in the last half hour, Rishi Sunak has vowed to grip this challenge of illegal immigration. I can't even say it. Why? Because I don't really believe him. Anyway, by working with European nations as he faced pressure to sign a new deal with France to curb channel crossings. What's the point? The original deal we've got is not worth the paper it's written on. Here's a boatload of cash, France. Don't do anything with it. Anyway, the Prime Minister said there was lots to talk about when he met Emmanuel Macron. I can think of several questions I'd like to ask Emmanuel Macron as well, actually. Anyway, for the first time at COP27, as reports suggest, he was set to press for a fresh agreement with the French president. The pair embraced at the UN Climate Change Conference in Egypt on Monday. Actually, apparently they're both the same height, so it would have been quite easy for them. During their first face-to-face encounter, Mr Sunak entered number 10 a little while ago, of course, and now he's actually meeting Macron. Earlier in the House of Commons, the Minister for Immigration, Robert Jenrick, was asked what steps are being taken to reduce overcrowding at the troubled Manston Immigration Centre. I think we can actually show it to you now.
The global migration crisis is playing an unprecedented strain on our asylum system. Despite what they may have been told by many, migrants who travel through safe countries should not put their lives at risk by making the dangerous and illegal journey to the United Kingdom. We're steadfast in our determination to tackle those gaming the system, and will use every tool at our disposal to deter illegal migration and disrupt the business model of people smugglers.
OK, well, Ben Habib joins me now, former Brexit Party MEP. Ben, thank you very, very much. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Why on earth would we give that pound shop Napoleon more of our cash to not do anything about it in the Channel?
It would be an utter... Any pound sent to France would be a wasted pound. We've already given them £300 million in order to get to grips with this problem. They haven't done it. Why? Because if they were to sort the problem out, they'd have more of these people in their country and the cash would stop. It absolutely suits them to take us for the mugs that we have been, to take our cash and allow the migration to continue. Of course, the French aren't doing enough to stop it. They could easily stop it if they wish to do so.
Yeah.
But they don't wish to do so. They want to take our money and they want to get rid of these people from their own country. The problem here, by the way, unlike what Robert Jenrick said, the problem is not a global crisis in migration. This is a European crisis in migration, aided and abetted by Germany and facilitated by freedom of movement and the Schengen zone right across Europe. And it is the United Kingdom that is paying the price for it.
Yeah, and a lack of will, Ben, a lack of will. I'm increasingly beginning to wonder whether or not Rishi Sunak has just decided that if he sticks Suella Braverman up as Home Secretary, he thinks that's enough. That's almost like a sticking plaster to show, look, I really do care about it. I don't really think there is that will there. I'm sorry, but Rishi Sunak going over and talking at COP27, maybe we're going to have to start paying reparations to poor nations. He should be right here, right now. Forget talking to Emmanuel Macron. What's going on with the Bill of Rights? Can we sort that out? Can we get a British Bill of Rights? That means when someone comes here illegally over the channel, not through one of the, by the way, many legal routes that exist, comes here illegally over the channel, we can get them out of it.
But actually, Patrick, it's much simpler than that. We don't need to change any laws whatsoever to get to grips with this problem. What we need to do is to get Border Force and the Royal Navy to do their job, which is to prevent these people from entering British territorial waters in the first place. There has to be a physical pushback of their boats as they try and enter our waters. And the argument made against that is that these people might knife their own boats, they might jump off their boats, and then under international law, we are obliged to save them. Well, I can tell you, and please get this right across every GB News presenter, we are not obliged under international law to save them from drowning if they put themselves willfully in harm's way. We are only obliged to save people insofar as it is reasonable to do so. And I think it is incredibly unreasonable for these people to seek to enter our country illegally and then to put themselves in harm's way. They've already done it entering the Channel, and we should push them back into French territorial waters and repeatedly do so until they learn that they will not be allowed to land on British soil, and they will not be picked up by a British boat if they choose to idiotically jump into a dangerous, unforgiving sea. That would be their free will being exercised, and our response should be to just leave them there.
Okay, I mean, strong stuff. Obviously, it's strong stuff. Ben, very, very quickly on this one, would you seriously be comfortable if we push them into French waters and these people then entered the water and the French didn't come and get them? Would you be comfortable in the knowledge that these people did drown, but that was the French's responsibility and not ours? You'd sleep all right at night, would you?
Well, look, first of all, they're exercising their free will. They've put themselves in danger by getting into the Channel. They're the ones not listening to the instructions they would be the ones not listening to instructions from Border Force and going back to France. But there are mitigating steps that we can take. We can have a spare dinghy in the back of the Border Force boat, which we can chuck in the water if they choose idiotically to knife their own dinghy, and say, here's a spare one, get in it, it's the only spare you're going to get. You know, we've got to toughen up. You talked about an absence of political will. But how are we possibly going to get the political will to deport them if we haven't got the political will to stop them from coming in the first place?
Look, Ben, it's same old, and I'm sorry, but this idea, it's like we're in a time warp. Oh, I'm going to do a new deal with the French. Well, it's going to be the same as before, isn't it? Oh, we can't quite get it. Oh, I'll bring in a British Bill of Rights. Oh, we need to sort out those pesky European judges. Oh, no, it's the same after the same after the same, and nothing gets done about it. Ben, thank you very much. Ben Habib, who is a former Brexit Party MEP. Strong stuff. What do you make of that? GBViews at GBNews. .uk. Get in touch, don't be shy. Just Stop Oil have been protesting around the M25 today. 23 of their members have now been arrested. One of them pretended to cry on top of a bridge. I loved every single second of it. What a waste of her private education. I bet her parents are proud. Anyway, new research suggests that lockdowns, get this, officially damaged our kids. That's right, we were banging on about it. I was told I was being insensitive and all of this stuff. Well, you know what? Children have, shock horror, catastrophically suffered as a result of lockdown. Talking of reparations, maybe we should have a few reparations from that. Where's Chris Whissy when you need him, eh? Now it's your headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. It's 4:34. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is due to address the COP27 climate conference shortly. Earlier, Rishi Sunak held bilateral talks with his French counterpart, embracing Emmanuel Macron as they met on the sidelines of the summit. They've been addressing the migrant crisis, discussing ongoing cooperation in a bid to try to prevent people from crossing the Channel illegally.
Well, look, we all want this situation to resolve itself as quickly as possible. I also want to be honest with people that it's a complex issue. It's not one simple solution that's going to solve it overnight. I wouldn't be being honest if I said that there was. There's a range of things we need to do. But what I want people to be reassured by that I absolutely am determined to grip this. I've been spending an enormous amount of my own time on it. I've been talking to several European leaders about it today. And there's a range of things that we will action as quickly as we can.
A £250 million plan to replace the national flagship, Royal Yacht Britannia, has been scrapped as part of cuts to government spending. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson championed the scheme when he was in charge, but faced criticism from MPs who feel there are other priorities for military spending. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace told the Commons he's prioritising the procurement of a multi-purpose surveillance vessel over the flagship. As world leaders gather to discuss climate concerns, environmental protesters have been disrupting traffic on England's busiest motorway. 23 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after police were forced to shut sections of the M25 this morning when demonstrators climbed gantries. Measures to prevent the spread of bird flu have come into force across England. All poultry and captive birds must now be kept indoors as the UK faces its largest outbreak of avian flu. The virus has been discovered at over 90 properties and found in more than 200 dead wild birds since the start of October. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere, Patrick's back in a moment.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
23 people have been arrested after Just Stop Oil protesters climbed gantries on the M25 this morning, despite a major Metropolitan Police operation to foil their plans. So Assistant Commissioner Matt Twist branded the demonstrations as criminality, with the intention of disrupting thousands of people's lives. Some people may say terrorism. His comments come just hours after the Met Police launched what they say is a significant operation to identify and arrest those it suspects of preparing motorway disruptions, making 3 arrests last night, including the leader of Just Stop Oil, Roger Hallam. It would be a shame if the key to that cell got lost. With me live now in the studio is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, it kicked off today on the M25, didn't it? There were tears.
Well, yes, the emotions were certainly running high, not least among the motorists, of course, who were stuck for hours on this orbital motorway. It's slow going at the best of times when you're dealing with rush hour on the M25, but with multiple locations, more than 7 targeted by Just Stop Oil, it meant effectively that this orbital motorway was at a standstill for quite a few hours before the police could get these people down. One of those, a young protester called Louise, made a video at the top of the gantry. Made a video at the top of the gantry, as they do, and this is why she said she was there.
I'm here because I don't have a future. And you might hate me for doing this, and you're entitled to hate me. But I wish you would direct all that anger and hatred at our government. They are betraying young people like me. I wouldn't have to be there if they did their lawful duty to their own citizens.
I mean, for goodness, she wasn't even crying. She wasn't even crying.
Well, I certainly didn't detect a tear coming down her cheek, that's for sure. No. There will be many motorists there who say, right, you clearly feel passionate about why you have decided to go there, the future of the planet, but rather than affect the lives of, people going about their everyday business, join a political party, make a difference that way, or target the politicians that you say are to blame. Regardless, she's been arrested. She's now effectively in contempt of court because there was an injunction secured by National Highways to stop any protests on the M25. So that now, in contempt of court, is taken much more seriously than just a public nuisance or traffic violation. So it carries with it an unlimited fine, potentially a jail term. We saw that working, of course, Patrick, before with Insulate Britain when they carried out similar protests about a year ago, and court injunctions were sought. A number of them went to jail, and it did have an effect. After quite a while, it has to be said, but it did have an effect of bringing about that particular campaign of disruption to an end.
I just think, do people really look at that hysterical woman on a bridge and think this is a cause I want to support? But of course, you couldn't possibly comment on something like that. Mark, thank you very, very much. Mark White there. Is he going to crack? No. No? No? OK, well done. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor, managing to keep a straight face. Good luck, Mark. Anyway, right, I'm joined now by the former editor at The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, who's going to further talk a bit about this issue. Kelvin, I do actually, just a heads up, I do want to talk to you a little bit about this, but you do seem also ideally placed to talk to me about the French as well, because I'm going to talk about the fact that we're potentially going to lob them a load of cash to not sort out what's going on the channel. But let's start with Just Stop Oil. I mean, it's nice to see that Roger Hallam has supposedly been arrested as a result of this.
Yes, the good news. The good news, as your reporter pointed out, that they are in serious trouble now. So they're going to actually face quite serious contempt charges. Now, contempt is not something you can just shrug your shoulders at, as I know from my experience during my Fleet Street time. Yes. So you're in big trouble. And I live literally probably only about half a mile to a mile from the M25. It's a nightmare. Monday mornings on the M25 is a nightmare. It's been chosen to try and disrupt literally hundreds of thousands of people's lives. They're wanting to get to work. They're wanting to get to school. They're wanting to get to. They're wanting to just go on holiday. For instance, imagine if you were heading to Heathrow. After all, they did it at junction 6 and 7. Well, Heathrow is round at 14. So even if people are set off early, there's a very good chance that their lives are being thoroughly
Kelvin,
destroyed.
it's a cult.
This has got to be dealt with.
Kelvin, it's a cult, OK? These people, genuinely, look at how hysterical that girl was. Now, there were no real tears there, so whatever private school her parents probably sent her to, she clearly didn't enrol in the drama classes, right? But at the same time, these people really are intent on... They're hysterical. It's almost like cult worship, this.
Right, well, the issue is this country, as we are discovering right now, needs oil.
Yes.
We need a lot of it. And the idea that we can go without it in any form right now is absolutely ridiculous. There may be a point in 20, 25 years' time Patrick, are probably running GB News, not just being a presenter on it, but that we don't need it. We need it right now. These people are an irritant, and they enjoy being an irritant. They enjoy the publicity. They enjoy the fact that people's lives are being disrupted because they say that way we are going to be able to deal with it. It's never going to happen.
I think
they're never, ever going to win, and nor should they.
No, honestly, I think they were bullied in school and now they want to take it out on the rest of us. But I just want to talk to you a little bit about another topic that I know is close to your heart, Kelvin, if that's all right. What's going on in the Channel, and specifically the French? Because from where I'm sitting, we're lobbing a load of cash over to Emmanuel Macron and he's doing absolutely naff all with it. Rishi Sunak has supposedly met him today. They had a face-to-face, which, of course, they can literally do because apparently they're exactly the same height. So two people there who are going to try and thrash out this migrant crisis. Look, what's the point in giving the French any more cash? They're not going to do anything for it. They're laughing at us. And even if they wanted to do it, I bet their border force is on strike anyway.
I do accept that point. Can I just say that I think that the uneasy point that GB News viewers may face is that I remember I'm in favour of Brexit.
Yeah.
But when we were in the EU, they wouldn't have been allowed to come to us because their last port of call would have been France. So this is where there is a dichotomy between doing what's right, which is Brexit, and one of the results of it. It's a very painful moment for us all. And the other point about this, I don't know whether you read about this hotel in Snowdon.
Yeah.
And there's a village also, I think, in Conway as well, which has only got 450 people in there. They just put 200 migrants who came through the channel there. I mean, the whole of Wales is likely to be filled up with channel migrants shortly, which actually, because I don't like Drakeford, cheers me up. But however, I do like the Welsh. So why this is the effect. 100,000 people,
but it's madness.
And a lot of them are being spread all over the country. So this is an issue which is actually getting larger in people's lives and becoming more immediate.
You know,
what are we going to do as a country? I enjoyed your last speaker, but let me just raise this issue, which is the one that you raised, really. What happens if somebody does, supposing a group of people jumped into the channel and then drowned? The global publicity that would be generated, could any government withstand that? Can you imagine what would Starmer and Miliband and all these other Dirks, what would they all say to that kind of action?
Yeah, the only way out, of course, we wouldn't want to see that happen to anybody, but the only way out of that, which is what I was trying to allude to Ben Habibi, who's our former speaker, is if it happened in French waters, then we pin it on the French. If it happens in our waters, of course, we'd have to do something about it. Very quickly, Kelvin, very quickly and very lastly, can I just take a bit of a bigger view on this? I have got massive concerns that something, yet again, like all terrible things in this nation, started by Tony Blair. Do you think there are some cynical people here who might think, well, actually, the more of this migrant channel stuff that happens, the more left-wing voters we end up with in the future? Is there any element of that, do you think?
No, I totally agree. Those 100,000 on their way here, already here, God knows how many more still to come. I have always maintained that the reason that Starmer and co, and I can't imagine what the previous Labour leader would have made of it, or he would probably have had some hampers waiting for them to be delivered as well, is that each one of those, they would take the view that they are likely to be an electoral positive for them.
Absolutely.
For instance, when you see the divide, I mean, a lot of the people coming in are Muslims, and when you see the divide, the Muslim population in this country basically votes 80% Labour, 20% Conservative, whereas, of course, Hindus, it's about 60-40, 70-30. So the reality is, every time somebody comes from Iraq or Afghanistan, or even, by the way, Albania, which is 60-70% Muslim, then actually Starmer is saying, goody, goody, excellent news. I'm bound to get elected in Hounslow now. I'm home and hosed in Hackney. You know, there are... So That is not cynicism. That is
No, it's not.
straightforward electoral maths.
Absolutely. And I suppose another benefit is that most of the people who vote in the Tower Hamlets election will actually be making their way over here now. But there we go. Gavin Mackenzie, thank you very much. As the former editor of The Sun, they're imparting his food wisdom onto you. What do you make of that? Strong stuff all round. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, the number, this is a really big issue, and it's what we were saying for absolutely ages, and we were told, no, it's fine, lockdown was a good thing, it won't have any impact. Well, get a load of this, OK? The number of 5- and 6-year-olds that need speech support has risen by 10% in England over the past year, according to the analysis by the BBC. Inconvenient truth this for the BBC, isn't it? Pushing lockdowns on us. Oh, here we go, kids can't talk. This increase is much greater than previous years and thought in part to be due to COVID lockdowns when social interactions were reduced. What else could it be? It's either the fact that it was COVID lockdowns, which meant that kids weren't interacting at home, or could it also be another issue that the BBC have very close to their heart, this wonderful thing with immigration that we've got now, where maybe these children aren't speaking English in their own homes. Either way, it's not a great look for the Beeb. The Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists says the profession is struggling to cope with the demand. The government says it's investing 180 million quid in early years development. Oh, great, more money, just so kids can learn how to talk. Let's talk now to Joe Hemmings, who's a behavioural psychologist. Look, Joe, how much is lockdown to blame for the fact that now apparently kids can't talk?
I mean, almost wholly. And then the first stage of speech, for example, is social speech, external speech. That's easy to do. That's mummy, daddy, I want milk. You know, it sort of directs what they want. You get to the second stage, which is known as egocentric speech. Now, if children are not mixing with others, it's a stage where children chatter away to themselves about what they're doing. And if they're not in an environment with other children, if they're kept away from other children of their age, their peer group, they will not develop proper speech and language skills. So I would say this increase is wholly to do with the lockdown.
And just to recap, this, as far as I'm aware, this COVID didn't really kill many children or affect them too badly. There was, of course, this much lauded inhaled vaccine, which we can now roll out to children and all of this stuff. They'll be giving it to fetuses next, won't they? And, you know, I think we can all agree realistically that children did not need to be locked indoors at this particular time. And the knock-on effects that we're going to have of this now, how damaging could it be to a child mentally going forward if they had 2 years-ish, look, a year and a bit anyway, of being locked inside, their early years interaction, people wearing masks so they couldn't see facial expressions or learn language, then they're plonked back in a school where they can't communicate with people. Are we going to end up with a generation of children with catastrophic psychological problems?
No, to be fair, I don't think we are, because children, thankfully, are very resilient. They're quick to catch up if given the right resources and the ability to mix with other children. I think if there were to be another lockdown in the next couple of years, that's going to be really difficult, because you can catch up to a degree, but you can't halt it again. So yeah, they've definitely been set back, these children. As you say, masks, they didn't get any kind of visual cues. Their whole speech and language development was stifled during lockdown. So it's really important but they can catch up. Sadly, it was inevitable this was going to happen. So I don't know why anybody's surprised. But they can catch up. They are resilient. So I hate thinking in terms of lost generations.
Look, can I?
But it's lost years.
I agree with you. I really hope that we haven't got a lost generation. I mean, their education was affected as well. And frankly, I think a lot of teachers saw it as an opportunity to get their little pay bonus by ramping up the kids' grades. And, you know, you've got a load of people now who've managed to get into Oxbridge who'll drop out because they can't hack it as a result of all of this. But that's a different topic for a different time. Joe, I just want to stay with you. Do you think that when Chris Whitty and Valance and GVT and little Matty Hancock, who's now coining it in the jungle, were thinking about putting us all into lockdown, do you think they thought of the kids once?
No, I didn't. I think they felt that this is what they had to do. I don't think they thought of anything in terms of children's development, our mental health. You know, it was just a sort of reaction to the virus. There was no considered depth to the way that they thought, to actually the sort of issues, the mental health issues, are a topic for another time, that adults have got. And they certainly didn't think when they closed schools and didn't allow children to sort of socialise in any way, or when they went out, all they could see were people in masks. They didn't know who advised them. Nobody was advising, or being advised incorrectly as to what this would do to our little ones moving forward.
Jo Hemmy's there. Thank you very, very much. Jo Hemmy's a behavioural psychologist, just discussing the fact that, get a load of that, people, the fact that now more children than ever before are struggling to even communicate with other children at school as a result of lockdown. Yet another unintended consequence, but one that was far too predictable. Stay with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And coming up, reaction to the Prime Minister's speech at COP27, plus what will come of Sunak's talks with Macron on migrants? Apparently they're in the final throes. I just hope, for the love of God, we don't end up tossing a load more money to the French so that they can do absolutely nothing with it. And do you think we should be focusing on re-establishing Britain as a global power? Should we be prioritising our domestic problems? I've got a massive problem with what's just been written in front of there. We are a global power. There's no need to re-establish anything. The fact is we should be focusing more on us and less on other nations, in my view. But before all of that, it's your weather. I bet it's raining.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. A rather grey but mild Monday out there. This evening, we could see some squally conditions where the winds just suddenly whip up. That's going to be courtesy of this weather front coming in from the west. The isobars squeezing together. It's also going to bring a very short but intense spell of rain to parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. We do have Met Office warnings in place. The heavy rain across southwest Scotland could also cause a bit of disruption. But here comes that line of rain. As I said, it shouldn't last too long, but it will zip through with some intensity, and the winds will just suddenly pick up and could cause some damage. That band of heavy rain and strong winds works its way across all of England overnight, easing as it does so, but nevertheless could get woken up by a rattling of a window pane. As it clears, temperatures will drop to single figures, but generally another pretty mild night and another mild but boisterous, blusterous day to come on Tuesday. There'll be a bit more sunshine tomorrow, but there will also still be plenty of showers. Nowhere really immune from the downpours. And again, when the showers come along, they'll be heavy, perhaps even turn into thunderstorms at times. But they should again zip through because it will be quite blustery. And it will still be fairly mild, 12 to 14 or 15 Celsius, maybe 16 with a bit of sunshine in the south. We'll keep a lot of showers around through the course of Tuesday evening, all spinning around a big area of low pressure up to the northwest. Wednesday will again bring plenty of showers and again some pretty heavy ones, mostly across parts of the south and the west. Looking a little drier on Wednesday, perhaps across parts of southern Scotland, and eastern England may not see too many showers by Wednesday afternoon. And again, there will be some sunshine around between the showers. And again, it will at times be fairly breezy, but it will still be mild with temperatures, again, mostly a few degrees above average, 11 to 15, getting even warmer come the end of this week. Bye for now.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky. That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back, you lovely lot. Patrick Christys here. It's just gone 5 o'clock. You're with me on GB News, TV, online and digital radio. Coming up in an action-packed final hour, Rishi Sunak is due to address the COP27 climate conference any minute now. Strap yourselves in, grab your popcorn. Will he sell us out when it comes to paying reparations to smaller countries? That is one of the main items on the agenda at COP27. Funding towards loss and damage from climate change. I'm sorry, we can't have tax hikes and cuts to public services and old people freezing to death in their own homes and also lob millions of pounds to places like the Marshall Islands. It does not work out. Should taxpayers' money be sent abroad to provide smaller nations with climate relief? I'm going to be asking about all of that. We're giving all of our money abroad. We've got foreign aid, we've got Ukraine, we've got all the stuff. What about what's going on over here? That's what I say. Also this hour, number 10 says talks between Emmanuel Macron, that pound shop Napoleon, and Rishi Sunak on joint action to solve the small boats crisis in the Channel are in their final stages. I hope it involves asking for all the money that we've given Macron back, and then we can actually just sort it out ourselves. But there we go. The two leaders met earlier to thrash out an agreement on this very issue. Is a relationship with the French the way to end the migrant crisis? And look at them both there. It's good, it's face-to-face because they're both the same height. Is it selfish of nurses to take a pay rise? That's another big question that I'm asking right here on GB News. They want roughly between 15 and 17% added to their pay packet. They had a pay rise earlier this year. They had a pay rise the year before that as well. I think if they go on strike, people die, and that's a bit selfish if you ask me. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We've got 1 hour left, ladies and gentlemen, for us to set the world to rights. Don't be shy, get in touch. That email again, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Now, it's your latest headlines with Tatiana.
Good afternoon, 2 minutes past 5. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is due to address the COP27 climate conference shortly. Earlier, Rishi Sunak held bilateral talks with his French counterpart, embracing Emmanuel Macron as they met on the sidelines of the summit. Downing Street says a deal on tackling illegal immigration is in the final stages.
Look, we all want this situation to resolve itself as quickly as possible. I also want to be honest with people that it's a complex issue. It's not one simple solution that's going to solve it overnight. I wouldn't be being honest if I said that there was. There's a range of things we need to do. But what I want people to be reassured by that I absolutely am determined to grip this. I've been spending an enormous amount of my own time on it. I've been talking to several European leaders about it today. And there's a range of things that we will action as quickly as we can.
The COP27 summit has also been told the world's action on climate change is either a collective solidarity or collective suicide pact. The UN Secretary-General says countries need a clear, financed roadmap to prevent irreversible climate chaos. Antonio Guterres is calling for a universal early warning system within the next 5 years and for all governments to impose a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies. He warned we're in the fight of our lives and we're losing.
The two largest economies, the United States and China, have a particular responsibility to join efforts to make this pact a reality. And this is our only hope of meeting our climate goals. Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. It is either a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact.
A £250 million plan to replace the national flagship Royal Yacht Britannia has been scrapped as part of cuts to government spending. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson championed the scheme when he was in charge, but faced criticism from MPs who feel there are other priorities for military spending. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace told the Commons he's prioritising the procurement of a multi-purpose surveillance vessel over the flagship. As world leaders gathered to discuss climate concerns, environmental protesters have been disrupting traffic on England's busiest motorway. 23 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after police were forced to shut sections of the M25 this morning when demonstrators climbed gantries. Measures to prevent the spread of bird flu have come into force across England. All of poultry and captive birds must now be kept indoors as the UK faces its largest outbreak of avian flu. The virus has been discovered at over 90 properties and found in more than 200 dead wild birds since the start of October. Tom Koppers, who's the manager at Koppers Turkey, says there's no risk to humans. There's ongoing disruption to rail services today, despite train strikes being called off. RMT cancelled the action after securing the promise of a pay offer from train companies. The late suspension of the walkout, though, means many train operators are only running a reduced timetable. Network Rail says there's quite a mixed picture of delays and cancellations depending on the train operator. A service has been held to mark the opening of the Royal British Legion's Field of Remembrance. The field at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire pays tribute to those who have lost their lives in conflict from World War I to the present day. It will be open to the public to pay their respects until the end of the month. The Prince of Wales has opened up about mental health. In a conversation with footballers Harry Kane and Declan Rice, Prince William said the game has taught him that disappointment is part of life. The trio shared their fondest football memories during a podcast ahead of the World Cup, which begins in under a fortnight.
You know, handling some of those really disappointing England results in the past, that was hard. I found that really difficult because, again, the same euphoria that we had comes crashing down and whittles away, and that's quite hard to take because you feel all on a high, you feel all together, and then suddenly normal life just gets back on again, and it's like, well, where did that all go? Was that real? What happened, and how do I get that feeling back? And yet football has that ability to just put it all on a plate for you and then suddenly just take it all away.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Yes, hello, it's Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, shortly, apparently, we've been waiting for over an hour for him now, but I'm reliably informed our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who is inexplicably in Egypt instead of back in his own country sorting out our own problems, will address COP27. That's the climate summit. He's expecting to call for a global mission for clean growth. Well, there we go. As discussions take place, richer countries are facing criticism from poorer countries who are pushing for financial compensation. Essentially, they want reparations and compensation for historical emissions, including from the United Kingdom, which basically means from you and I. There we go. However, Downing Street insisted the UK was already helping countries deal with the impacts of climate change. I'm quite keen to get stuck into this because key pledges were made by world leaders last year at COP26 in Glasgow. Remember that? Let's have a look at some of them, shall we? It was agreed that countries would meet in 2022 to pledge further cuts to carbon dioxide emissions. There was an explicit plan to reduce the use of coal. It pledged to significantly increase money to help poor countries cope with the effects of climate change and to make a switch to clean energy. Fossil fuel subsidies, world leaders agreed to phase out subsidies that artificially lower the price of coal, oil or natural gas. Importantly as well, now we are facing massive pressure to do things like ban fracking, so we're not allowed to use the resources that you and I are sitting on currently because Greta Thunberg, that angry Swedish teenager, would be very, very upset if we did. But back to that pressure on richer countries to pay poorer countries financial compensation for what they say is, well, basically our responsibility for historical emissions. Is that fair? Joining me now is social commentator and campaigner Professor Patrick Vernon OBE. Now, aside from our names, I suspect that that's the only thing that we've got in common, unfortunately, Professor Patrick. But just talk to me about why there's even an argument that people like me should be paying money to people like the Marshall Islands for emissions gases that I didn't let off.
Well, it's not simply people like me, because I'll be paying the taxes, paying that myself, to be quite honest. And you have to recognise that Britain is the 5th richest economy in the world. Where did that wealth come from? Where did we make our money? We made our money, sadly, at where other countries lost out. And it's only fair and fit and proper for a very rich nation. I know that in your headlines you give them people.
Well, I'll tell you what. Can I just ask? Sorry. Can I just ask?
We're quite a wealthy country. I mean, the wealth gap is getting wider and wider, and we are part of the international community. And I think it's fair and proper for us to play a fair contribute in that way around for the greater good of humanity.
That's fair enough. We produced a chap called Alan Turing, born in Manchester, great guy, cracked the Enigma code and stopped the Germans winning World War II. Does the rest of the world have to pay us reparations for that?
Well, if you brought the World War II, and obviously Germany, even today, are still paying reparations to the Jewish community for what they did during that horrific period
they didn't
of
just
history.
affect the Jews.
So I think there is a wide range of precedents. Even in America, when a lot of Japanese Americans were interned as a result of Pearl Harbor, they were recognised eventually for reparations for the way their human rights were abused. So there are international precedent examples. I think with Britain, we like to laugh at other people, make jokes about people, but we're not taking the responsibility, especially when you look at the history of empire.
I feel absolutely no responsibility whatsoever. I just want to make that very clear. I feel absolutely no.
I'm talking about the collective responsibility of nation states. I'm not talking about individuals up and down this country. I mean, remember, it was only until 2015 that you and I were contributing as taxpayers to pay rich people who got money at the end of slavery in 1833. Very rich people indeed. We paid for them. We had to borrow money to pay for that. So you had to pay for it. I had to pay for it. And so there's a history of that, which is always one-sided.
I've had an email in from Christopher. Christopher says, this is my last month before I get cut off my gas and electric, and we want to give millions to other countries. I think it's going to be a hard sell, Professor Patrick, to say to Christopher that we should be giving a load of money to a load of other countries when he's sitting here about to go without gas and electric. Why do people in other countries matter more than Christopher, who's right here now?
People should matter here in this country. Remember, during the height of the pandemic, we spent trillions on dodgy PPE equipment.
We did, but just deal with this issue.
We have the resources. It's about the prioritisation of our resources, to be quite honest.
OK, well, just talk to me about this specific issue right now. I do get what you mean. There was a lot of money wasted during the pandemic, and I cover that elsewhere in the show. I want to talk about this right now. Why should it be that we pay money for people in other countries when we've got people like Christopher right here now who can't afford his gas and lecky?
It's a good point, and there's often people up and down this country who are impacting big time on this cost of living crisis. But the cost of living crisis is something in the making of this government. The cost of living crisis is something that I hope that the budget will reflect on that. But also, we have to recognise that we do have an international commitment and obligation. We have signed various treaties since the Second World War to try and make this world a safer, better place for all of us. So we can't just think about Britain, GB all the time. It's about our wider humanity, which I'm sure a lot of people will recognise and reflect on that.
Look, I absolutely get what you're saying in terms of a lot of people will reflect on that. I think what's going to be a tough sell again is the fact that we're about to see massive tax hikes. We are seeing cuts to public services. We've got an energy crisis, a cost of living crisis, and we can argue till the cows come home about exactly who's responsible to that and the reasons behind it all. But we are where we are, and as long as we are there, which is, to be honest with you, staring down the barrel of a recession, etc., it's difficult to justify, I think, to the vast majority of people why we should now be sending some money, or quite a bit of money, potentially, depending on what Rishi Sunak agrees on, elsewhere to pay for historical damages. Is it not fair enough to just say, look, let's just look after our own?
But we've been looking after our own for the last 400 years, thank you very much. We have made loads of them. The problem that we've not had done properly in this country is to make sure that the person who left that message, white working class people, as well as other racialised working class people, I've been let down by a number of governments. That's the problem.
Well, how does giving money, with respect, how does giving more money to Pakistan help that?
More and more people are getting richer in Britain while people are getting poorer.
But have we hit the nail on the head here? Have we hit the nail on the head here, Professor Patrick? Which is, actually, do you just want a communist utopia?
No, we want a democratic country that meets the needs of everyone. I'm not a communist, and even under communism, they still had a oligarchy of people that looked after themselves anyway. So we don't want to go down that road either. We want to have a fair, just, equal society where people have access to what they need. We're very proud of our NHS. We need to pay the nurses a decent wage. We need to pay our frontline workers a decent wage, and we're not doing that.
But realistically, is this where you are now, which is that you are looking at the global picture and just being honest? It's fair enough to just be honest. You want a socialist world, don't you? Which is possibly why you are more inclined to want us to do things like pay reparations. You don't really care about wealth, do you? In fact, you'd probably rather that no one had any.
The German government is not a socialist government, but they have made a commitment over the last 50 years to pay reparations for what the evil deeds they did to the Jewish community during that period.
Yeah, but are they paying it to gays and gypsies as
There's
well?
an international principle of reparations where a number of countries have done that, and I think Britain should start smelling like coffee and recognise that we've made lots of money and we've done very well, but we've let down people in Britain and also we've let down people internationally, and it's about time that we came through a process of restorative justice and recognition as well.
Right, OK. All right, look, thank you very much, Professor Patrick Vernon there, OBE. Interesting comments there. How do you feel, ladies and gentlemen, back at home? If you're listening in your radio in your car or online or whatever, or social media, you can't move for GB News at the minute. What do you make of that? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Look, I can't help but wonder whether or not realistically, a little bit like our friend Professor Patrick there, the fact is, it's all very well and good saying we owe a load of money in reparations, which is... They just want a socialist world, don't they? And therefore don't necessarily care about anyone's wealth. But there we are. Lots of you have been getting in touch. On the nurses' strike. So Julie says, what about the 3 years training where student nurses work in hospitals for nothing? What about all the hours they work for nothing? Study in their own home, or in their own time, sorry. Can't always give the first-class care they would like because they are so overwhelmed. GPs are paid a lot of money, but are not back to pre-COVID appointments. So everyone flocks to A&E, making their jobs harder. I think that was Julie there, was it? Yes, Julie saying essentially that, my take on that is that she backs a nurse's pay rise. And actually, look, everyone's entitled to their own view. I'm not necessarily against the nurse's pay rise, by the way. I'd quite like to make that clear. I am sceptical as to whether or not they deserve, on top of a 3% and a 4% pay rise that they've had in the last 2 years, now a 15 to 17% pay rise on what they've got at the minute, especially during this particular time. I'm not convinced that that's the solution, but you're entitled to your view, Julie. Of course, Tony says, simple solution, tie any potential pay increases for frontline staff in the NHS to NHS reform and streamline by getting rid of non-productive employees, such as diversity and inclusivity officers on 40 to 60k a year. This is a big thing. I was listening to the radio earlier on, actually, and someone was saying that one of the big differences between our health system and other countries' health systems is that actually we have a lot more bureaucracy, a lot more management, a lot more higher paid people on that. Maybe, quotes unquote, lower level NHS staff would be better equipped to just run it themselves. I've got a massive problem with this, and that problem is pretty straightforward. If you knowingly go into a line of work where you are designed to save lives, that's what it is, OK? And the pay scale is available on the internet. You can Google the nurse's pay scale. You may disagree with it, but you know what it is. And then all of a sudden, in the wake of a pandemic, which the country locked down to protect the NHS, the country locked down to protect nurses and all of that stuff, you then go, I won't give someone chemotherapy today because I want a 17% pay rise. That, to me, is a bit rum. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Moving away from that now, because talks have been held on the migrant crisis between Rishi Sunak and the French President Emmanuel Macron at the COP27 climate summit today. So, spokesman apparently indicated that talks on the specifics of the deal were taking place separately, involving Home Office officials rather than being dealt with by the two leaders. That all seems rather confusing, to be perfectly honest with you, but there we go. Joining me now on the show is Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, who is a Paris correspondent at The Telegraph. Anne, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Now, somebody like myself is deeply sceptical about the French's commitment to stopping small boats coming across the Channel, no matter how much money we give them. Should we just stop giving the French money because nothing's going to happen, is it?
I don't something that's quite true. I think what changed was the fact that the city of Calais tried to get rid of some of the biggest sort of problem areas in the place called the Jungle, which was much worse than the retention centres, for instance, for which Mrs. Braverman was accused. And what the result is that now the migrants are spread alongside the coast, and you've got about 100 miles of coast where little boats can leave. So it is very obvious that you need more people to police it, and it's a difficult thing to organise. There also has been no incentive because there was bad blood, to be honest. As a figure of speech, not actual blood, but still there was bad blood between the French and the British government, and it is likely that it's going to change now.
Can I just pick up on this? Because Emmanuel Macron threatened to cut the power off to Jersey during a particular energy crisis. I think that was over some scallop fishers, right? We've also had strong allegations that Emmanuel Macron may have stolen some AstraZeneca vaccines that were destined for the arms of, presumably at that particular time, quite elderly British people right at the height of the coronavirus pandemic. He called our former Prime Minister a knucklehead. He's taken somewhere in the region of about 60 to 100 million quid's worth of British taxpayers' cash and, as far as I can tell, not really done anything when it comes to stopping the migrant boats. I'm not being funny, but I think Emmanuel Macron might be an enemy.
Well, no, an enemy is Vladimir Putin. Second, everything you've said is true. It is not the same thing at the same moment, and it's not in the same way. For instance, on AstraZeneca, you're quite right and quite accurate. On other things, it was French minister. It was the French minister for the sea who threatened during things. It's not the same thing. She was actually reprimanded afterwards. But in a sense, was there a sort of prickliness between France and Britain? Yes. And some of it was because the French felt there's no reason why we should help Britain because Britain has got as much against us. And Boris Johnson, to name him, was saying exactly the same things about France in this sort of oratant, funny way that he has, but still it didn't work so well. And the idea is that now you've got some, Rishi Sunak is the grown-up in the room, which makes a difference in terms of talking with him, as we were seeing right now in Sharm el-Sheikh. And also, each wants something of the other, which was not necessarily something that Boris Johnson wanted. There is politics in this. It looked very good. I mean, being French, I perfectly understand, because I've been brought up in England, that it's enjoyable to bash the French, and you don't bash the French, you wait to bash. It's not the way you bash the Germans, for instance. There's always a twinkle in the eye. So I take this with a great deal of a massive rock of salt. But it's right now, they're both in a difficult situation. They want to get there. They speak the same language. They're the same type of guy, more or less the same age, the same education, the same kind of career.
The same height as well.
And they can talk the same language at a moment when Emmanuel Macron is in a bad political situation and Rishi Sunak is at the basically last chance saloon.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if we could make Emmanuel Macron's political situation a little bit worse for him, actually, by towing some of these boats back into French waters. I mean, this could be a huge problem for Emmanuel Macron if we decided to do that, because if we're not getting value for money, right, then actually, I'm sorry, but surely the rules don't really apply. We're lobbing a load of money France's way. They're not, it would seem, really doing much with it. Well, we're not going to play by the rules then. Here you go, have some boats back.
Nobody has been playing by the rules for quite some time, assuming that there are rules. But the situation in France is France has a migrant as well. We perfectly understand it. At the French-Italian border, the French are not exactly playing with the EU rules because it's not supposed to be a border because it is within Schengen, but strangely enough, you've got many, many, many customs checks all the time, even in the mountains around the French-Italian border. So it's not that we don't have problems. And Britain sees the migrant crisis because they all come from the same place, basically, which is a small area in southeast Britain. And in France, we've got a coastline, we've got 3,000 miles of borders, and they come in from it's much more diffused, but the figures annually are just as bad as in Britain. It's not something that we don't understand.
OK, all right, look, thank you very, very much. I must say I've really, really enjoyed that, actually. Great to have you on the show. Of course, that was Anne Elizabeth Matei, who is a Paris correspondent at The Telegraph, just reacting to the fact that Emmanuel Macron and Rishi Sunak have apparently met to decide, one would imagine, precious little when it comes to solving the migrant crisis. Well, after the meeting with Macron, Rishi Sunak told reporters that the situation, won't be easy to solve.
Well, look, we all want this situation to resolve itself as quickly as possible. I also want to be honest with people that it's a complex issue. It's not one simple solution that's going to solve it overnight. I wouldn't be being honest if I said that there was. There's a range of things we need to do. But what I want people to be reassured by, that I absolutely am determined to grip this. I've been spending an enormous amount of my own time on it. I've been talking to several European leaders about it today. And there's a range of things that we will action as quickly as we can to get a grip of this situation and reduce the amount of illegal migration that we're seeing.
There we go, Rishi Sunak there. Coming up after the break, as COP27 gets underway, a, quote, significant operation to identify and arrest climate change protesters suspected of planning reckless and serious motorway disruptions has begun in London. We'll discuss that next. We'll also bring you Rishi Sunak's address live from COP27. I mean, we've been threatening to bring that to you for about an hour and a half now, but apparently Rishi is yet to emerge. He'll be late for his own funeral, that guy. Back in a moment.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky. That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg. And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
That's right, it's Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, the Met Police Service has launched what they call a significant operation to identify and arrest climate activists they suspect of planning reckless and serious disruptions. It's essentially trying to nick them before they actually do anything To begin with, Assistant Commissioner Matt Twist said that officers arrested a number of people last night on suspicion of conspiracy to intentionally or recklessly cause public nuisance. However, it's not really words, because actually there were a load of them sticking themselves to a bridge on the M25, including a girl who was pretending to cry. 10,000 police officer shifts from the Met have been dedicated to policing these orange-clad, super-glued numpties. To break this down further, I am joined by former Met police officer Chris Hobbs. Chris, thank you very much. So, can the police... Look, do we even need strong evidence, hear me out on this, that they're going to... specific strong evidence that they're going to start gluing themselves to something? We know they are, just stop or they're not going to stop. Why can't we put their leader in prison, throw away the key?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because the police have made something like 700 arrests during this campaign, and I think 100 charges have been laid against them. So I think there is an issue here between the police, who do what they're supposed to do, and it is very time-consuming, and police don't like being stuck out on motorways. They'd rather be on their own patches. But then the question is, what happens after that? And I did actually tweet earlier today how nice it would be if the police arrested, did their notes, spoke to the Crown Prosecution Service, and then the Crown Prosecution Service said, yes, there's enough evidence, we'll charge them. And I got a laughing gif, one of those things where a gentleman's laughing hysterically at the suggestion. I think it's basically bureaucracy causes all sorts of problems. And interesting, Patrick, I was there on Saturday where there was quite a big, you will be aware of it, a big leftist march, anti-government march.
Yeah.
Now, it all went very well. The protesters were absolutely fine. No trouble with the police. No insults hurled at the police. Apart from, at the end, Just Stop Oil started their shenanigans around Trafalgar Square. And what was noticeable was the lack of support for them from the 17,000 or so people in Trafalgar Square.
Look, this is it. They say, the vast majority of the public support our cause. Well, it's because they ask the public questions like, do you want to burn to death? And do you actually think that climate change is real? So they bracket that as like, oh, look, everyone's on our side. You ask anyone, do you think it's right to glue themselves to the bridge of the M25? I mean, to me, Chris, that seems like a problem that could be sorted out rather quickly with a tranquiliser dart. Like when they see them on Attenborough documentaries, just getting a rhino from a helicopter like that. I mean, I wouldn't be against that personally, but that is why I'm nowhere near the levers of power, which is probably a good thing. But at what point does this become domestic terrorism?
Well, yes, that is a good point. I'm not sure, to be quite honest. I do know that it's a nuisance. It's more than a nuisance. It affects people quite dramatically in their daily life, and police are very, very frustrated that it's not being dealt with the full force of the law. Because at the end of the day, they're not fools. They know they're not being violent. In many ways, it'll be easier to deal with a group that are violent. Because they're not violent, it makes life difficult.
Chris,
when police approach...
Just quickly, maybe, just because it's something I want to get you on. I've only got about a minute or so before I have to go to the news. Do you think it's a cult?
I think it's coming very close to that, isn't it? It's a few people, a very few people. I watched their antics on Saturday. I watched them being orchestrated by their leaders. They do seem quite fanatical about what they do, but really the inconvenience they cause is out of all proportion to their numbers, which I have to say is ridiculous. And I think that view is shared by those police officers who are stuck in carriers for hours at a time, having to deal with them, and then not getting them before a court. I think only a handful have ever been imprisoned, which you have to say, given the disruption, there has to be some question marks.
Yes, 100%. Look, Chris, thank you very much. That was great to have you on the show. Former Met police officer there, Chris Hobbs, just reacting to the latest Just Stop Oil nonsense. They said they were going to just stop their protest. They've not, have they? But coming up, the biggest nursing strike in NHS history is set to take place before Christmas. Classic, just at the amount of time when people get most ill and are at the most vulnerable. Thank you very much, everybody. That Nightingale oath or pledge there is not really working, is it? But union officials claim to have a large majority when it comes to voting for a nurses' walkout. I've been building up to this all show. Hundreds, if not thousands of you will be getting in touch in the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I've been asking you, do you back a nurses' strike? They want something like a 15 to 17% pay rise. People will die as a result of this, but do you think that we owe them for their work during the pandemic? Spoiler alert, I don't think we do. All right, we'll be back in a tick.
Good afternoon, it's 5:34. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron have agreed to cooperate on a nuclear energy deal. It's to cope with the impact Russia's war on Ukraine is having on energy supplies. During bilateral talks at the climate conference in Egypt, they also addressed the migrant crisis. Downing Street says the deal on tackling the problem is in the final stages.
Well, look, we all want this situation to resolve itself as quickly as possible. I also want to be honest with people that it's a complex issue. It's not one simple solution that's going to solve it overnight. I wouldn't be being honest if I said that there was. There's a range of things we need to do. But what I want people to be reassured by that I absolutely am determined to grip this. I've been spending an enormous amount of my own time on it. I've been talking to several European leaders about it today. And there's a range of things that we will action as quickly as we can.
A £250 million plan to replace the national flagship, Royal Yacht Britannia, has been scrapped as part of cuts to government spending. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson championed the scheme when he was in charge, but faced criticism from MPs who feel there are other priorities for military spending. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace told the Commons he's prioritising the procurement of a multi-purpose surveillance vessel over the flagship. As world leaders gather to discuss climate concerns, environmental protesters have been disrupting traffic on England's busiest motorway. 23 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after police were forced to shut sections of the M25 this morning when demonstrators climbed gantries. Measures to prevent the spread of bird flu have come into force across England. All poultry and captive birds must now be kept indoors as the UK faces its largest outbreak of avian flu. The virus has been discovered at over 90 properties and found in more than 200 dead wild birds since the start of October. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.1493 and €1.1471 euros. The price of gold is currently at £1,459 and 67 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 dipped, closing at 7,299 points.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, I think this is probably the main issue of the day because the Royal College of Nursing is set to announce the results of its ballot on strike action later this week. There's reports that a large majority have voted to walk out. It is the first time the RCN has balloted all of its 300,000 members for strike action in its 106-year history. So, get this, OK? So, this is what's going to be affected if nurses walk out. Outpatient surgery, day surgery, chemotherapy and dialysis. So that's just some of the services that could be disrupted. The Royal College of Nursing is demanding nurses receive a cost of living pay rise of 5% above inflation. Now, inflation currently stands at around 12.3%, so you do the maths. This will give the average nurse who earns roughly £35,600 a year an extra £6,150 annually. I actually went to an A&E department earlier today to ask nurses and patients what they thought about this proposed strike.
Something has to be done.
You would die for a nurses' strike?
I would absolutely do anything that I possibly can. Die not because they will find someone. They won't let anybody die. They will delay services.
That could lead to death, though, couldn't it?
I am I have 100. I'm severely ill. I've had 24 operations on the.
Gosh, sorry about that.
Thank you. And I can tell you 100% that these people won't let anybody die.
15%, that's a lot. 8%, yeah. But 15% it's a lot.
We're really short of staff. We're not really paid well. There's really a shortness of resources as well. Everyone sees their little circle and their life. So obviously from what we do, we care for people. I care for patients in intensive care. Without us, what are they going to do? So obviously for us, what we're paid is not worth what we're doing.
Considering the hours that they put in and the lives that they save and the hard work.
15%.
15%. It sounds fair to me.
Right, there we go. That was the views of some people. It's fair to say the views of the people in my inbox differ distinctly from all of that. It would seem to me, anyway, that the vast majority of you are dead against a nurses' strike. Earlier on, I did actually speak to an NHS nurse. She's not going to be striking. Just listen to this.
I've thought about this and I haven't actually sent the reply back. I just thought I'm not doing it. And that to me counted as my no. But really, looking back on it, I should have said no. So they're clear that that's my intention. I won't strike. However, I certainly won't condemn anybody for doing that because it's not just about the money, Patrick. We're very short-staffed. We're having to use agency nurses that might not know that particular job, that speciality. So we're having to do extra work.
That's an amazingly balanced clip there from a woman who did also actually come down quite strongly in favour of not striking. But there we go. To discuss this further, I am joined by NHS GP Dr Mo Karki. Dr Mo, thank you very, very much. Your view on whether or not nurses should strike, because I think if they do, they'll have blood on their hands.
Well, I think it's clear that a lot of the people who have been surveyed outside the hospital and even that nurse are supporting the strike action. And from my perspective, I see it in both sides. I can see the concern from the public sphere that we would have a strike, we'd have reduced services, we would be impacted, and that is something nobody wants to face, really.
Get chemotherapy treatment, Dr. Mo. Dr. Mo.
Sorry?
Dr. Mo.
Yeah.
Not being able to give someone chemotherapy care is... it's not a million miles off murder.
Well, I think we need to be kind of a little bit less inflammatory with our concepts. I mean, chemotherapy is meant to reduce cancer spreading or treat a cancer. We're not murdering someone. Sometimes people miss chemotherapy because they're sick. That cold hasn't murdered them. So I think we need to be a bit careful in the way we speak.
You cannot possibly tell me, Dr. Mo, sorry, right? You can spin this any way you want. Did you take a Hippocratic oath, right, to do no harm? Supporting a strike that would stop someone getting chemotherapy is doing harm.
So what I would suggest is that we have to think about it in the way of short-termism versus long-termism. That will probably be the easiest way for you to understand how the mentality is, because I think the nurses recognise, just as that nurse who even, as you said, she wanted to say no to the strike, but she even recognised that she won't stand against her colleagues, because in this situation, nurses are leaving the industry in their droves. They can't afford to continue working in the NHS, so they're finding other means. Now, that's because of a few things. The first one is, of course, that nurses' pay has been cut between 6 and 20%, depending on what you read, in the last 10, 15 years. Now, the cut in pay is one thing. Then you've got the inflation and rise of cost of living, which we've talked about
which we're all going through. Which we're all going through.
But if your cost of living is going up, but your pay is going down, what do you do?
Your pay isn't going down. No. I'm not going to let you lie to me. Sorry, I'm not going to let you lie to me and the nation. Nurses have had 2 pay rises in 2 years. And the nation locked down to protect you and to protect nurses. We locked down. This idea now that I think we need to be
careful about what a pay rise is.
I'm sorry, but the idea, right, that the nation owes you and nurses a special debt of gratitude for what you did during the pandemic, I think is absolute nonsense. People lost their jobs, people couldn't see loved ones, people lost their sources of income, people have got debts, people lost their homes. Everyone as a nation suffered as a result of the lockdown, which was done in order to preserve our health service. Most people who work in shops, for example, are not getting a pay rise in line with inflation.
I think you're right. I think you're right to some extent, which is that you know, of course, no one's asking for any debt of gratitude, but I think we need to be very careful, and you especially need to be very careful to make sure that when you're framing this discussion, you're not framing it as, I worked really hard in the pandemic, I want more money. That's exactly what's not happening.
I'm framing it on people dying as a result of people going on strike because they want far too much money.
Sure. Obviously, let me finish my point, and then you can sort of interject. I think the point is that if you are in a situation when your pay has been reduced, and now it's already reduced, so you could at any point ask for a pay rise, but now the cost of living is so high as well. That's what's prompted the nurses to have to call into action. Now, all nurses, all doctors, all healthcare staff take this Hippocratic oath. They want to do the best. But think about this. If your pay is so low that you can't afford to heat your house, you can't afford to eat, you can't afford to do things, you'll leave the NHS. The short-term thing is, wow, we don't one day impact it. But the long-term impact is the key. The long-term impact is that all the NHS will be depleted of staff, which we've talked about across all allied healthcare staff, including doctors, all the way down to everyone who's involved in the system. Now, if that happens, the long-term problem is the NHS will be decimated, and that could cost lives. So actually, this action is probably preventing and saving lives in the long run, but you just need to have a bit of thought about why it's happening, and that's why it is.
OK, all right, so what do you say to someone who's just got in touch with me now, who's Deborah, who says that she's worried that she will not be able to get chemotherapy treatment? I know people, for example, who are on dialysis. You're just happy for them not to get that because... So Deborah needs to see the long-term picture, does she? She's just not thought it through enough, has she?
Well, no, obviously, I think the thing is that
just because there's a chance... Sorry, just quickly, sorry, Doctor, it's just because there's a chance, isn't there?
Give this rise to the nurses. But I think the point is that it's a little bit like the Christmas service, the Boxing Day services. Unfortunately, those services we discussed won't happen. Now, when that happens, and with this planned strike, the nurses and the unions and everyone will come together and make the correct plans so that you won't miss your chemotherapy, you won't miss those things because those
then why do we need them to begin with
at a different time.
See, this is the thing. This is the thing.
Just like when you have Christmas,
they're not that valuable if we can just do without them.
Pardon?
They can't be that valuable if we can just do without them.
Without what, sorry?
Oh, you say this is one of the main arguments that when I speak to nurses and medical professionals, they go, oh, don't worry, people won't be that impacted on because we'll make provisions for it. Well, I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways. Either you're valuable enough that we need to give you a pay rise so that the NHS doesn't crumble, or there won't be an impact from you leaving. So which one is it?
Sorry, no, I think what I'm talking about is essential services like chemotherapy. So when you have an essential chemotherapy service, and obviously you're asking an expert now, a doctor who's qualified, we have an ability to change the day on which we would issue the chemotherapy drugs so that the service is not impacted. However, the point is that in striking on that day, you're making an impact, you're making a statement, and people are sitting up and noticing. It's not ideal. Nobody, I think, wants this at all. I certainly am not somebody who wants this to happen. I would urge always us to sit around the table and find another solution, but it seems that hasn't happened so far, and 50% of the union of nurses are voting to do something about it.
Yeah. Can I just quickly suggest as well that I asked a nurse earlier on outside that A&E, I said, when you went into nursing, did you Google what you were going to be paid? And she said no. Now, I would argue that's her own fault.
Yeah, I mean, I think remember, one thing is nurses and doctors, and this is probably the rhetoric we need to get away from, and actually something that we need to be really careful is we don't really go into this thinking about how much money we're going to make at all, because if you looked at it, the amount of hours and effort and struggle you're making compared to what you could achieve, at that level of intellect and dedication, going to any other profession, you'd make lots more money. We do it because we care. We do it because we love to do it. We love to help.
All right. OK, look, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I've got to cut you off because, well, I wanted to anyway, but Rishi Sunak is speaking at COP27 in Egypt.
Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II addressed COP26 last year. She reflected how history has shown that when nations come together in common cause, there is always room for hope. I believe we found room for hope in Glasgow, with one last chance to create a plan that would limit global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees. We made the promises to keep that goal within reach. And the question today is this: can we summon the collective will to deliver them? I believe we can. When we began our COP presidency, just 1/3 of the global economy was signed up to net zero. Today, it is 90%. And for our part, the UK, which was the first major economy in the world to legislate for net zero, will fulfill our ambitious commitment to reduce emissions by at least 68% by 2030. And because there is no solution to climate change without protecting and restoring nature, in Glasgow, more than 140 countries, which are home to over 90% of the world's forests, made a historic promise to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by the end of this decade. And just this afternoon, I co-hosted the first meeting of the Forests and Climate Leaders Partnership to ensure this is delivered. Central to all our efforts is honouring our promises on climate finance. I know that for many, finances are tough right now. The pandemic all but broke the global economy. And before coming here today, I spent last week working on the difficult decisions needed to ensure confidence and economic stability in my own country. But I can tell you today that the United Kingdom is delivering on our commitment of £11.6 billion. And as part of this, we will now triple our funding on adaptation to £1.5 billion by 2025. But let me tell you why. First, I profoundly believe it is the right thing to do. Listen to Prime Minister Motley of Barbados as she describes the existential threat posed by the ravages of climate change. Or look at the devastating floods in Pakistan, where the area underwater is the same size as the entire United Kingdom. When you see 33 million people displaced, with disease rife and spreading through the water, you know it is morally right to honour our promises. But it is also economically right too. Climate security goes hand in hand with energy security. Putin's abhorrent war in Ukraine and rising energy prices across the world are not a reason to go slow on climate change. They are a reason to act faster. Because diversifying our energy supplies by investing in renewables is precisely the way to ensure ourselves against the risks of energy dependency. It is also a fantastic source of new jobs and growth. In Glasgow, we began an approach globally, using aid funding to unlock billions of pounds of private finance for the development of new green infrastructure. So instead of developing countries being unfairly burdened with the carbon debt of richer nations and somehow expected to forego that same path to growth, we are helping those countries deliver their own fast track to clean growth. And the UK is making further commitments to support this today, including by investing £65 million in a range of green investment projects in Kenya and in Egypt. I'd like to pay tribute to President Sisi for his leadership in bringing us all together, and to thank the UK's President of COP26, Alok Sharma, for his inspiring work to deliver on the Paris Agreement and Glasgow Climate Pact. By honouring the promises we made in Glasgow, and by directing public and private finance towards the protection of our planet, we can turn our struggle against climate change into a global mission for new jobs and clean growth. And we can bequeath our children a greener planet and a more prosperous future. That's a legacy we could be proud of. So as we come together once again in common cause today, there really is room for hope. Let us fulfill it. Thank you.
Well, that was Rishi Sunak there, our Prime Minister, who is at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? A couple of people emailing in actually already just said it didn't appear to be much of a mention of China there, for example, but there we go. I think essentially the gist of that really was that he's saying that, you know, climate security goes hand in hand with energy security. It's all a little bit of kind of climate-based waffle, I felt there. I don't know what you thought. Nothing particularly concrete. Massive concerns as well anyway at the minute that we're going to end up paying something like climate reparations. So basically that we're going to have to pay smaller nations, well, I suppose a little bit of a backhander of sorry for developing faster than you and in the process of it doing things to impact the environment. Lots of you have been getting in touch saying, no, we could do with that money ourselves at the moment. But speaking at COP27, just to summarise, that was in Egypt. Rishi Sunak said protecting forests was one of the best ways of getting us back on track to limit warming, even easy for me to say, to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the threshold beyond which the worst impacts of climate change will be felt. I'm quite keen to figure out whether or not you think he should actually be there. We've got a lot of issues here. Look, we had a doctor on, a GP on there. I did not get on with him, it's fair to say. But look, I'm sorry if it came across as though I was quite angry about it. It's because I am very angry about it. You know, I am very, very angry about every single day. I have people like in my inbox here saying what a pickle they're in medically. And, you know, it's all really well and good GPs coming on with a well-placed stethoscope round their neck and going, oh, well, actually, nurses have had a pay cut. They haven't had a pay cut. I'm not saying they don't deserve a pay rise, but to go on strike because you're not going to get a 17% pay rise at this particular moment, right in the depths of winter, I think is a bit rum. Anyway, Jubes and Co's up next. Michelle is right here in the studio. Michelle, what's going on?
Hello, Patrick. Yeah, of course, we'll be picking up on this whole kind of damage and loss, reparations, whatever you want to call it. Should we be spending money on countries that have been suffering, apparently because of our industrial actions when it comes to climate change? That's what I want to know. And get this, Patrick. More than half of teachers say they feel more like social workers than teachers. Why? And where are the parents in all this? And lastly, Gavin Williamson in trouble again, apparently for bullying and threatening texts. What's going on with all these MPs? Are they out of control? Or do some people, Patrick, just need to toughen up, especially in public office?
Buckle up. There we go. Well, Michelle, it's going to be another absolutely box office outing from yourself, no doubt. Michelle Dewberry will be up in just a matter of moments. Thank you very, very much, everybody who's been getting in touch and who's been talking to me throughout the course of this show. It's been a bit of a rip-roarer. We've covered it all. We've had a bit on immigration, of course, haven't we? Will we get a new deal between Sunak and Macron to try and help what's going on in the Channel? Will we get a British Bill of Rights? We're also going to be talking, of course, a bit later on, as Michelle said there, about all these, well, supposed anyway, historic reparations. How do you feel about all of that? Make sure you get in touch with Michelle, GBViews at gbnews.uk. I've been Patrick Christys. I'll be back again at the same time at 3 o'clock tomorrow. I will see you then. Take it easy.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News. And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives